In a world where adventurers were revered and levels determined one's worth, Ye Qing was at the bottom of the hierarchy, level 0, a mere abyss picker. His days were spent scavenging in dungeons, gathering scraps left behind by more skilled adventurers. It was a thankless job, but one that kept him alive in a society that valued strength above all else. One day, Ye Qing found himself in unfamiliar territory, a B-rank dungeon. It was his first time in such a dangerous place, and he felt the weight of his inadequacy. Armed with a battered weapon, he encountered a formidable B-rank monster. Try as he might, his attacks barely scratched the creature. He was outmatched and overwhelmed, struggling to survive. However, beneath the scornful gaze of his peers, Ye Qing harbored an indomitable spirit. With sheer determination, he landed a blow on the monster, dealing a paltry but significant damage. To understand how Ye Qing ended up in this predicament, we must rewind to his daily life. As an abyss picker, he sorted through loot from dungeon expeditions, ensuring every piece was accounted for. Failure meant severe consequences, including imprisonment, a risk he couldn't afford with his mounting debts. Years of this mundane existence were punctuated by a staggering debt of 670,000 yuan looming over him. Every day, he toiled with the sole purpose of paying off this debt, exacerbated by the exorbitant medical bills for his gravely ill sister. She needed urgent medical treatment he couldn't afford, adding urgency to his quest for money. When a lucrative job offer promising 3,000 yuan came his way, he couldn't refuse despite the danger. The money was crucial not just for himself, but to save his sister's life. Entering the B-rank dungeon with a group of seasoned adventurers, Ye Qing hoped for acceptance and camaraderie. Instead, he was met with scorn and condescension. The elite hunters made it clear he was a burden, warning him to stay out of their way if he valued his life. During their journey, Ye Qing accidentally bumps into one of the hunters, causing them to lash out at him. Despite apologizing, he's treated with disdain and left behind by the group. Unbeknownst to them, every hardship and insult fuels his determination. As he continues in the dungeon, barely surviving encounters, Ye Qing roams the dungeon hoping to earn enough experience to level up from 0 to 1. This milestone raises questions. Will this newfound strength from leveling up from 0 to 1 change his fate? Or will he remain the same weakling in the eyes of others? After hours of relentless exploration and combat, the dungeon's echoing halls finally quieted as Ye Qing and his fellow hunters gathered around the fallen monsters. They began the arduous task of collecting materials vital for their trade. Suddenly, a monster appeared before them, having evaded the other hunters. Instinctively, Ye Qing reached for a nearby staff and shield, relics of past battles lying amidst the dungeon's debris. His colleagues, gripped by fear, hesitated before fleeing, leaving Ye Qing alone to face the advancing beast. With nowhere to retreat and adrenaline coursing through his veins, Ye Qing steadied himself, eyes fixed on the creature's approaching silhouette. In the tense moments that followed, Ye Qing's mind raced. He knew his current level was insufficient to inflict any meaningful harm on such a formidable foe. Yet, instead of succumbing to fear or fleeing in futility, he saw an opportunity, a chance to transcend his limitations and advance to the next level of his abilities. With a resolute breath, Ye Qing swung the staff with all his might, aiming for the monster's vulnerable points. Despite his efforts, the blows landed weakly against the creature's hardened carapace, barely causing a ripple. His colleagues, watching from a distance, shouted warnings, urging him to retreat. They knew, as did Ye Qing himself, that his strength was inadequate to breach even the weakest monster's defenses. But rather than retreat, he saw this as his chance to level up, needing just one more point. Though his strike with the staff was futile against the monster's defenses, Ye Qing knew he had to persevere to grow stronger. Meanwhile, in a separate chamber of the dungeon, the other hunters busied themselves with collecting valuable spoils. As they were collecting the materials, they were also exchanged mocking remarks, dismissing Ye Qing and his colleagues as inept scavengers unworthy of the guild's acclaim. Suddenly, the ceiling collapsed, and Ye Qing plummeted with the monster clinging to him. In that heart-stopping moment, Ye Qing summoned every ounce of strength and resolve. Determined not to perish as a mere footnote in the annals of dungeon lore, he unleashed a primal scream, a declaration of defiance against fate's cruel hand. As he fell, Ye Qing's trembling hands found the staff's grip once more. With a desperate surge of energy, he directed its splintered end toward the creature's unblinking eye. The blow struck true, a precise strike born of sheer willpower. A critical hit, exactly the catalyst needed to propel Ye Qing from the barren fields of level 0 to the promising foothills of level 1. As Ye Qing celebrated his victory, it was however, proved short-lived as a fellow hunter approached, his smirk laden with derision. The hunter was deriding him for defeating a low-level monster. However, a screen appeared before Ye Qing, presenting numerous job options to enhance his strength. It explained how even a level 0 member could change jobs upon reaching level 1, though gaining experience was a daunting task. Despite the hunter's mockery ringing in his ears, Ye Qing knew the true significance of this moment. For years, he had braved the dungeon's perils, risking life and limb to amass the precious experience points needed for advancement. This opportunity was not merely a chance to change jobs but a testament to his perseverance and unwavering resolve. With a mixture of trepidation and hope, Ye Qing selected the role of Scavenger, a title that, though modest, promised unique abilities and untapped potential. Yet, as he contemplated the implications of his decision, doubt gnawed at him. Would this newfound path truly lead him to the strength he so desperately sought? Turning his gaze to the fallen monster, Ye Qing noticed a peculiar message hovering above its motionless form, a prompt inviting him to recycle the creature's remains. Intrigued, he accepted without hesitation, triggering a surge of power within him. The monster's corpse disintegrated, leaving behind a mysterious cart adorned with intricate runes and symbols, a repository of skills and attribute points waiting to be harnessed. Eagerly, Ye Qing attempted to absorb these newfound abilities into his being, expecting an immediate surge of strength. To his surprise, the effects were more subtle, a dormant potential awaiting activation. Confounded yet undeterred, he felt a strange energy stirring within him, a testament to the latent power he had just unlocked. Upon recovering, Ye Qing noticed more monster corpses around him, each offering skills and points for absorption. Realizing the potential of his ability, he understood it was far from weak, it could catapult him to become one of the strongest hunters in the world. Ye Qing became stronger by absorbing monsters' corpses. When he touched a spirit wolf's body, he gained a new ability called Soul Dash. But after that, eating more of the same kind of monster didn't give him new skills or as many rewards. Still, Ye Qing kept absorbing corpses until his attribute points reached 111. With plenty of points to spend, Ye Qing thought about where to put them to make himself stronger. He decided to evenly distribute the points among all his skills: strength, agility, intelligence, willpower, constitution, and luck, all set at 20 points each. Meanwhile, in another part of the dungeon, the other hunters were busy fighting monsters and collecting materials. They heard that Ye Qing had found a hidden job. They knew these hidden jobs weren't usually very valuable and were often just for fun. Their boss told them to stop talking and focus on their mission to conquer the dungeon. Hours later, they found the remains of the falcon hunting group's captain, who had been defeated within just 48 hours. Shocked by the desiccated bodies of B-rank hunters who should have easily handled low-level monsters, they suddenly found themselves surrounded by a horde, realizing too late they had been lured deeper into the dungeon. Back with Ye Qing, abandoned by his group, he seized the opportunity to absorb more corpses, steadily gaining skills and points. His efforts culminated in unlocking the novice scavenger's milestone after absorbing 50 corpses, earning him rewards, a basic necklace and dagger, disappointingly weak for his level. As Ye Qing scrutinized his meager rewards, a monster lunged from behind. With newfound strength and speed from leveling up, he dodged the attack effortlessly, no longer the vulnerable novice he once was. Confident in his enhanced abilities, Ye Qing countered with a powerful attack, followed by a precise dagger strike that slew the monster. Absorbing the fallen creature's corpse, Ye Qing acquired a new passive skill, Toxic Evolution, allowing him to transform potent poisons into healing elixirs. Testing his newfound ability, he drank a poison potion, converting it into a healing tonic that mended his wounds instantly. Impressed, Ye Qing realized the potential of his evolving skills. Reflecting on his progress, Ye Qing decided to bolster his intelligence further, knowing it would unveil hidden insights about his foes. Despite more monsters approaching, Ye Qing no longer feared them. He welcomed the challenge, knowing that defeating more monsters would make him even stronger as a scavenger in the dungeon. On the other side of the dungeon, the hunters fought desperately for their lives against the dungeon's boss monster and its minions. Most of them had already fallen. Though the minions were reanimated corpses and of lower level than the boss, they posed a formidable challenge to the hunters. Not to mention the boss itself, a man-eating flower of immense strength. Realizing they were outmatched, some hunters attempted to retreat, but the relentless onslaught of monsters made escape nearly impossible. Panic spread among the hunters as they struggled to catch their breath between waves of attackers. The monsters proved too powerful, picking off the hunters one by one. Among them, one hunter regretted his decision to enter this deadly dungeon for quick wealth and gear. Now facing imminent death, he made a selfish choice, to sacrifice his comrades as bait to secure his own escape. When questioned by his team, he callously fled, promising to burn incense sticks in their honor once he reached safety. He ran through the dark corridors, haunted by thoughts of what could have been. In his panicked flight, he collided with Ye Qing, drawn by the sounds of battle. Ye Qing, known for his mysterious abilities, confronted the fleeing hunter. He couldn't believe the hunter would leave his friends to die. Fearing repercussions if Ye Qing reported his cowardice to the supervisory committee, the hunter decided to eliminate him. However, upon turning, he noticed a trail of slain monster corpses behind Ye Qing. Astonished, the hunters asked if Ye Qing had defeated them all, to which he affirmed. Seeing Ye Qing's strength firsthand, the hunter hesitated. He suggested Ye Qing join them to fight the monsters together, hoping to save himself from both the creatures and Ye Qing's wrath. Ye Qing, angered by the hunter's betrayal of his friends, struck out impulsively. He broke the hunter's leg, leaving him in pain and disbelief. The hunter cursed Ye Qing, but it was too late. Writhing in pain, the hunter berated Ye Qing as a trash human, demanding an explanation for the assault. Driven by memories of how hunters had treated him when he was weaker, Ye Qing used his unique ability to absorb the hunter's strength. However, the system stopped him, saying he couldn't absorb humans like monsters. Instead, it upgraded his ability, allowing him to recycle useless abilities from others with their consent. Using a magical card he found, Ye Qing gained flame field control and upgraded his fireball to Inferno Blast, making his magic even more powerful. Excited to test his new abilities, he unleashed Inferno Blast, destroying monsters effortlessly. But the spell was so strong it disintegrated the monsters, leaving nothing to absorb, a mistake he regretted. Suddenly, an assassin-like monster attacked from behind. Ye Qing, realizing he had no melee combat skills, absorbed the fallen hunter to gain a golden shield ability. With this new defense, he defeated the assassin. After the battle, Ye Qing absorbed the assassin's body, obtaining a dagger proficiency card that granted him the ability to wield daggers with finesse, launching a storm-like stabbing attack. Activating the card, Ye Qing now possessed yet another valuable skill in his growing arsenal. Now stronger and more skilled, he prepared to face the dungeon's challenges with renewed confidence. Inside the interrogation room, men in black suits were questioning a hunter who survived a dangerous dungeon expedition. They reminded him of his mission: find the Falcon group and bring them back alive. The hunter nodded, acknowledging the task's importance. They warned him that failure to find their bodies would mean no rewards for him. He reassured them he understood, already aware of the consequences. They asked if he found the Falcon group's corpses. The hunter's answer puzzled them: he had found them, but they had been recycled. Confused, the men asked what he meant. The hunter explained that Ye Qing had somehow absorbed their abilities and skills, leaving him reduced to level 1. This was unheard of, and the men suspected he might be hallucinating due to abyssal energy contamination. But the hunter insisted it was true, adamant that Ye Qing had drained them all. Meanwhile, Ye Qing was back to exploring dungeons to earn money for himself and his sister. He had sold magic crystals he found, but the black market took a big cut due to monopoly rules. Despite barely making enough to pay off old debts, Ye Qing was cautious about revealing his unique ability to recycle others' powers. He knew if the authorities found out, he could be locked up for study. So, he resolved to keep making money quietly until he could secure his sister's future. At another location, preparations were underway for a risky raid on a new B-rank dungeon. The leader warned of unknown dangers inside, promising high rewards for those brave enough to conquer it. Only high-ranking B hunters were allowed to join. Ye Qing, only level 1, stepped forward to ask if he could come along. The leader scoffed, calling him trash and saying he didn't belong with them. Just as it seemed Ye Qing would be left out again, Lu Xingran, a famous hunter from the powerful Lu family, intervened. She insisted Ye Qing be included to fill out their numbers. Despite objections, her family's authority over the dungeon's location gave her the final say. Relieved, Ye Qing felt grateful for her support. Ye Qing felt relieved as he exhaled deeply, but noticed Lu Xingran staring at him coldly. He wondered why she was looking at him like that until memories from 2 years ago flooded back. She had been in danger, surrounded by monsters, and he, despite being weaker, had rushed to protect her. Back then, Lu Xingran had been shocked that someone like Ye Qing, a trash picker as she called him, could fend off dangerous beasts. During their conversation, Ye Qing had proudly celebrated his first demon kill and earned his very first experience point. Lu Xingran couldn't comprehend why he risked his life for just one experience point, looking at him with disbelief. He explained his ambition to level up and earn money. While she questioned his motives, Ye Qing remained focused on the valuable drops the monsters left behind, dreaming of selling them for profit. He challenged Lu Xingran's understanding of his difficult life, believing she couldn't comprehend his struggles because of her privileged background. When Lu Xingran asked him about his true reasons for wanting to level up, Ye Qing revealed his deep desire to protect his family. Touched by his sincerity, Lu Xingran promised to support him on his journey. She invited him to join her group once he improved his skills, sealing their promise with a handshake. Their conversation was interrupted by one of Lu Xingran's anxious aides, who urgently summoned her back to her father, the president. A stern bodyguard reminded Ye Qing of his status as a trash picker and barred him from getting too close to Lu Xingran. As they left, Lu Xingran threw Ye Qing a material she had obtained from the dungeon beast, a token of gratitude for his earlier bravery. Ye Qing caught the gift with a grateful smile. He returned to his work with renewed determination, knowing he would continue to strive for strength and prosperity for the sake of his family. Back in the present moment, Ye Qing's thoughts drifted to the past, interrupted abruptly by one of the hunters approaching him. The hunter whispered that the woman Ye Qing had been watching was Lu Xingran, renowned among hunters. He was then told to focus on gathering monster materials, and Ye Qing agreed. With a stern reminder to focus on their task of gathering materials from monster drops, Ye Qing agreed wholeheartedly. Determined not to be a liability while keeping his gaze away from Lu Xingran, he received encouragement from her on his newfound resolve. She commended his mindset and urged him to prepare his gear as they readied to conquer the dungeon. All the hunters assembled and geared up meticulously. Ye Qing entered the dungeon with a newfound determination to earn money and return safely, recalling his previous dungeon exploits where he had acquired numerous skills and abilities, including Shield Warrior and Berserk abilities. His unique method of distributing attribute points ensured no skill deficiencies, amassing over 100 points in total. In that instant, Ye Qing activated his skill Observing Eye, allowing him to look at the attributes of his fellow hunters. One stood out with a mere 12 points in strength and a mere 1 point in intelligence. By comparison, Ye Qing boasted a staggering 100 points in strength, making him at least 100 times stronger than an average person. As Ye Qing assessed their strengths, a sense of impending danger washed over him. His instincts proved true as he swiftly detected a trap, a set of walls closing in rapidly. Before the other hunters could react, Ye Qing had already dismantled the trap mechanism. The sudden noise startled the group, turning their attention to Ye Qing, who appeared visibly shaken. When questioned about the disturbance, Ye Qing attributed it to the natural reverberations of the unstable underground structures. His explanation eased their concerns momentarily, as they understood the inherent risks of exploring such hazardous dungeons. Just then, one of the hunters stumbled upon a chest and excitedly alerted the group. They gathered around the chest, eager to unlock its secrets, but their enthusiasm quickly lowered when they realized it was an A-rank chest, only accessible to skilled assassin-type hunters. Disappointment hung in the air until Ye Qing stepped forward with quiet confidence. "I can open it," Ye Qing declared calmly, catching everyone off guard. Without hesitation, he approached the chest and, with practiced finesse, swiftly unlocked it. The lid swung open effortlessly, revealing its hidden contents. The hunters stared in disbelief as Ye Qing's ability defied their expectations. One of the hunters, astonished, remarked, "Lock-picking is a skill reserved for assassins above level 5. How can a level 1 scavenger open such a chest?" Ye Qing, quick to maintain his cover, spun a tale about his extensive experience scavenging dungeons, often encountering locked chests amidst the debris. He explained that over time, he had learned various skills out of necessity, including the art of picking locks. Impressed with what he did, the hunters accepted Ye Qing's explanation, and the focus shifted to exploring further into the dungeon. As they ventured deeper, Ye Qing's keen intuition once again proved invaluable. Sensing something amiss, Ye Qing abruptly halted the group and instructed a puzzled female hunter to stop. He grabbed a nearby stone and tossed it ahead. In an instant, the trap sprang to life, walls lined with lethal spikes closed in, poised to impale anyone in their path. Ye Qing's swift action had averted catastrophe, saving the group from certain peril. Despite the narrow escape, the female hunter couldn't suppress her curiosity and wondered if Ye Qing was actually a level 1 hunter. Ye Qing responded calmly and told her not to overthink it, as he had dealt with these kind of traps many times in countless dungeons while scavenging, so it was natural for him to notice the traps. His nonchalant explanation convinced everyone except Lu Xingran, who remained cautious and observant, withholding her full trust. Nonetheless, the others respected Ye Qing's quick thinking and resourcefulness. Impressed by his skill, one of the hunters offered Ye Qing a modest ability as a token of appreciation. Despite this, some hunters still doubted his true abilities, but they agreed to move forward cautiously. After exploring for some time, they stumbled upon a hidden treasure room. The discovery sparked excitement among the hunters, who speculated about the riches it might hold. One of them suggested it could be a peaceful reward room, free from monsters. At the heart of the room sat a peculiar setup, a cup brimming with crimson liquid and a stone tablet inscribed with cryptic symbols. One of the hunters picked up the tablet, attempting to decipher its meaning. However, Lu Xingran, ever vigilant, warned them not to let their guard down. Her instincts proved right when the liquid began to spill from the cup, triggering a sudden announcement: the blood trial had begun. Panic seized the group as the room transformed into a trap, spawning the menacing blood nightmare before their eyes. Lu Xingran swiftly took charge, rallying the hunters for battle against the onslaught of monsters. Despite being surrounded, she led with determination, her skills tested to their limits. Meanwhile, amidst the chaos, Ye Qing remained remarkably composed. His mind raced with calculations, not of strategy against the monsters, but of how best to conceal his true abilities. Aware that revealing his full strength could raise suspicions among the hunters, he made a calculated decision. Quietly activating the Ring of Weakness, a seemingly harmless artifact that allowed him to suppress his attributes, Ye Qing chose to fight at only a quarter of his true power. It was a risky gambit, but he was determined to maintain the facade of a novice hunter. Even with his powers dampened, Ye Qing's agility and precision were unmatched. Using his Spirit Dash ability, he swiftly dispatched several monsters with precise strikes, earning surprised glances from his companions. Lu Xingran, amidst the chaos, couldn't help but notice Ye Qing's exceptional skill. Each move he made seemed deliberate and efficient, far beyond what his level would suggest. She filed away her observations for later consideration, focused on the pressing danger at hand. The monsters, cunning and adaptive, began to take on forms resembling the hunters themselves. Their ability to mimic and strengthen themselves based on their opponent's attributes made them formidable adversaries. In the heat of battle, one of the hunters suffered a severe injury, his arm torn by a monstrous version of himself. Just as the creature poised to deliver a fatal blow, Lu Xingran intervened with a swift and decisive strike, saving her comrade and dispatching the monster with lethal precision. Frustrated by the hunter's struggles against what she deemed inferior foes, Lu Xingran scolded them sternly, telling them that she did not enter the dungeon together with them just so she could rescue them when they were in trouble. She told them to pull themselves together and also told them that the opponents was not a true test of their strength. Despite her leadership, the situation grew dire as more monsters flooded into the chamber. Sensing an opportunity to turn the tide, Ye Qing took charge once more. Positioning himself protectively in front of his fellow hunters, he unleashed a powerful Great Flame Explosion, a spell of remarkable potency for his supposed level. The hunters watched in awe and disbelief as the spell engulfed a cluster of monsters, reducing them to ash in seconds. Murmurs of disbelief and confusion spread among them as they could not believe that a level 1 hunter could wield such devastating magic. Seizing the moment, Ye Qing followed up with shock, immobilizing the remaining monsters, and then activated Berserk, enhancing his speed and strength to swiftly dispatch those before him. In the midst of the chaos, a monstrous form emerged, one that bore striking similarities to Ye Qing himself. It was a king-level monster, infused with attributes absorbed from Ye Qing during their brief encounter. Realizing the danger of facing an enemy so closely mirroring his abilities, Ye Qing braced himself for a grueling battle of wits and strength. Just as he prepared to engage the monster, Lu Xingran stepped forward, her eyes blazing with determination. She told Ye Qing to step aside and that she would be the one to handle this. Her voice carried a rare intensity, born of ambition and a personal quest to conquer the deepest levels of the Tower of the End. Failure here would mean more than defeat, it would shatter her aspirations and familial expectations. Summoning all her strength, Lu Xingran unleashed a devastating comet strike, aiming to shatter the monster's defenses. Ye Qing, witnessing her formidable display, felt a newfound respect for her abilities, impressed by her determination and skill. Despite her powerful attack, the monster stood unharmed before Lu Xingran. She couldn't believe her strength didn't affect it. Even though she was an S-class hunter, she always felt inferior to her older siblings who shared her surname Lu. She had been mocked and laughed at by her family from the start, so she was determined to become stronger, even if it meant starting from scratch. Each challenge she faced was a stepping stone towards surpassing her limitations, a journey she undertook alone to forge her own path to strength. Determined now more than ever, Lu Xingran unleashed another relentless assault on the monster, pouring all her might into the attack. Yet, her fierce determination could not compensate for her current lack of strength, and she found herself overmatched by the relentless creature. The other hunters watched in astonishment as the beast dominated Lu Xingran, their fears growing that this could spell the end for them all. If even Lu Xingran, their strongest member, could be overpowered, what hope did they have? Seeing Lu Xingran struggling, Ye Qing made a decision to intervene, rushing forward to aid her. Despite her injuries, Lu Xingran couldn't help but feel a mix of frustration and gratitude towards Ye Qing for interfering in her battle. Ye Qing activated his observing eye ability to examine the monstrous creature for any weaknesses. Being at king level, the monster had developed resistance to abnormal conditions. At such high levels, it could even become completely immune to freezing, dizziness, paralysis, and slowness. Weak spots that were once vulnerabilities no longer posed any advantage as its level increased. Realizing this, Ye Qing decided to unleash his full potential, activating all his attributes. Despite matching the monster in strength, he found it immensely challenging to bring it down. Every part of its body he destroyed swiftly regenerated and no apparent weakness could be found. Suddenly, Ye Qing noticed a strange behavior in the monster, as if it were under some form of external control. Recalling a stone tablet with inscriptions that might hold the key to defeating the creature, Ye Qing urgently shouted to a nearby hunter to kick the tablet over to him. Responding swiftly, the hunter sent the tablet sliding towards Ye Qing. Utilizing his ability to decipher ancient languages, Ye Qing quickly uncovered a solution right before his eyes. He regretted not using his observing eye earlier. If he had, he might have found the clue sooner and avoided this tough fight. At that critical moment, the monster devoured the stone tablet, triggering an ability that rendered it invincible. Frozen in place, it puzzled the hunters, who were unsure why it had stopped all movement. Ye Qing quickly identified the situation, explaining that the monster had entered an invincible mode. Just then, Lu Xingran approached Ye Qing. She proposed that her ability could momentarily freeze the monster, allowing Ye Qing to locate its vulnerable spot. Understanding the urgency and complexity of the situation, Ye Qing acknowledged her suggestion, emphasizing that no challenge could be faced alone indefinitely. He proposed a collaborative effort, urging Lu Xingran to team up with him to strategize against the creature. Encouraged by Ye Qing's confidence and determination, Lu Xingran agreed with a smile, ready to contribute her skills to the effort. Other hunters gathered around, pledging their support. Ye Qing accepted their help, uniting them in a plan to take down the monster together. He briefed them that the monster's invincibility would last for 5 seconds before it entered berserk mode, where it would rampage for 30 seconds. Their goal: survive the rampage to have a chance at victory. With everyone on board, Lu Xingran took charge, directing a warrior-class hunter to provoke the monster while instructing a mage-class hunter to target its newly formed tentacles and shield Ye Qing. Under Lu Xingran's decisive leadership, the team coordinated smoothly. Ye Qing addressed the hunters, emphasizing that the stone tablet held the key to deciphering the blood test and defeating the monsters. Their immediate goal was to retrieve it from the monster's belly. Ye Qing volunteered for the difficult task, proposing a daring plan: he would enter the monster's belly himself to retrieve the tablet. Lu Xingran was taken aback by Ye Qing's audacious idea, but before she could object, he charged directly at the monster, determined to carry out his plan. Reacting swiftly, Lu Xingran instructed the archer-class hunters to target the ceiling with their arrows. The hunters quickly complied, sending a barrage that caused large debris to crash down onto the monster, dealing damage and aiding Ye Qing's risky attempt to retrieve the tablet. Taking advantage of the distraction, Lu Xingran used her frost abilities to freeze the lower part of the monster, immobilizing it temporarily and creating an opening for Ye Qing to approach. Ye Qing possessed extraordinary regeneration abilities, allowing him to swiftly heal minor wounds and shrug off the monster's sporadic attacks. He boosted his speed and defensive maneuvers, steadily closing the distance towards the monster. However, just as he was about to reach his target, the monster suddenly launched a sneak attack that caught Ye Qing off guard, dealing a powerful blow. The sight of Ye Qing taking such a hit left everyone visibly concerned. Ye Qing felt defeated and on the verge of giving up. Despite his increased strength, he couldn't shake the feeling of being worthless, believing nothing would ever change for him. But he refused to surrender easily. He refused to remain the weakling he once was. With newfound determination, Ye Qing activated his unique recycling ability. Everyone present was astonished by Ye Qing's newfound power. In a decisive moment, Ye Qing instructed the system to recycle him. However, the system couldn't recycle its owner. Undiscouraged, Ye Qing ordered the system to forcefully eject him from its body with all its might. The system complied, propelling Ye Qing with tremendous force directly towards the monster. He pierced through its body, retrieving the precious tablet lodged within. With the stone tablet in hand, Ye Qing deciphered the ancient script inscribed upon it, unlocking the key to completing the blood trial and vanquishing all the monsters in the vicinity. The hunters erupted in celebration, filled with joy at their success in completing the trial and ensuring their safety. As the atmosphere settled, each hunter present experienced a surge in their abilities, leveling up except for Ye Qing, who remained at level 1. This outcome didn't surprise Ye Qing, as he knew that his maximum level was destined to remain unchanged. Just as the hunters celebrated their victory, a treasure vault emerged from the ground, filled with magnificent treasures. Excitement filled the air as they gazed upon the valuable artifacts. However, disappointment clouded Ye Qing's face as he realized that the treasures required a minimum level of 10 to be wielded, far beyond his current level 1. He reluctantly stepped back, unable to partake in the spoils. Seeing Ye Qing's disappointment, Lu Xingran approached him and declared that he, having contributed the most to the trial's success, should distribute the treasures. Ye Qing modestly declined, insisting he desired nothing. Yet, in a hushed exchange, he confided in Lu Xingran, asking her a favor. He proposed selling the treasures to her and the Lu family, as they were wealthy and he was in dire need of funds. He also requested that she keep his true capabilities in the dungeon a secret, allowing her to take credit for conquering it instead. Lu Xingran hesitated, puzzled by Ye Qing's desire to conceal his abilities. Nonetheless, she agreed to honor his wishes. Outside the dungeon, hundreds of men in black suits, Lu Xingran's bodyguards, waited anxiously. Time ticked by as they prepared to mobilize a rescue team for their absent leader. Just as they were on the verge of action, Lu Xingran emerged from the dungeon, accompanied by the other hunters. Relief washed over her bodyguards, their tension melting away at the sight of her safe return. Amidst the joyful reunion, a news reporter approached, eager to capture the moment. He congratulated Lu Xingran on her remarkable achievement in conquering the dungeon, seemingly on her own. Remembering her promise to Ye Qing, Lu Xingran gracefully accepted the praise, proudly affirming her reputation as an S-rank hunter. Privately, she wondered about Ye Qing's peculiar request to keep his role in the dungeon's success a secret. What drove him to insist on staying in the background despite his evident skills? The mystery of Ye Qing's intentions lingered in her thoughts as the crowd celebrated their victory and safe return. Meanwhile, inside the dungeon, Ye Qing sat in the center of the blood trial room, his attention fixed on the ancient tablet before him. Suddenly, a small fragment of the defeated monster emerged from the tablet. Ye Qing's face lit up with a grin as he realized the potential it held. Even this tiny creature could become a source of strength for him. With his unique ability, Ye Qing absorbed the essence of the monster, enhancing his own power. After consuming the monster, Ye Qing unlocked a new ability called Nightmare Body. This skill allowed him to summon a spectral clone fueled by life essence, capable of mimicking his actions and absorbing or dealing damage once before fading away. Excited by this discovery, Ye Qing planned to further develop and improve this ability in the future. Content with his achievements in the dungeon, Ye Qing decided it was time to leave. Later, in a quiet coffee shop, he carefully examined the items he had obtained from his adventure. However, he realized that selling high-level items might attract unwanted attention from supervisors. Deep in thought about how to proceed, Ye Qing accidentally pressed a button on his device. To his surprise, this action triggered the automatic recycling of the weapons in his possession into basic points. Ye Qing was astonished to learn that he could convert these basic points into currency for repairs and enhancements. Without hesitation, he used these points to upgrade his older equipment. Not only were his weapons repaired to perfection, but they were also enhanced beyond their previous capabilities. Ye Qing was thrilled with the results, feeling well prepared for any future challenges. With his strengthened weapons and newfound abilities, Ye Qing left the coffee shop with a renewed sense of confidence. His strategic thinking and resourcefulness had proven effective once again, ensuring he was ready to face whatever trials awaited him next. Ye Qing completed the tutorial, and the system congratulated him, presenting 2 rewards. The first reward was a novice formula for a convenient magical potion capable of instantly restoring mana while significantly reducing fatigue. The second reward offered a random attribute increase of +2. After reviewing the options, Ye Qing chose the magical potion formula. At that moment, Ye Qing reasoned that attribute points were not currently scarce, but his greatest concern lay in the unpredictable depths of the abyss. Many adventurers, lacking proper preparation, often depleted their magic reserves before reaching the boss room, forcing them to retreat and resupply. Because of this, magic potions were essential to a group's survival, and their value could not be overstated. As Ye Qing reflected on this, the system notified him that he had acquired the item regeneration skill. It further explained that regenerating the convenient magical potion required 6 basic points and a random container. This left Ye Qing momentarily puzzled by the unusual requirement of a random container for activating the skill. Ye Qing reflected on the requirements for regenerating items, finding it unsurprising that basic points were necessary. However, he remained puzzled by the additional need for a random container. Seeking clarity, he called over one of the shop workers and requested a container. With the container in hand, Ye Qing conducted a series of experiments to understand how to use the newly acquired skill. After some trial and error, he succeeded in recycling an item, though he observed that the regenerated item appeared odd. Despite its unusual appearance, it seemed functional. To test its effectiveness, Ye Qing drank the contents of the container. Almost immediately, the system informed him that he had successfully created 5 doses of the convenient magical potion. However, as soon as he took a sip, he was overcome with nausea, as the potion tasted like rancid juice. Despite the unpleasant taste, Ye Qing felt a surge of power coursing through him. The system confirmed that his magic reserves had increased and his fatigue had significantly decreased. Ye Qing reassured himself that this outcome was beneficial. His magic had been restored, and the exhaustion weighing on his body had vanished. Moments later, Ye Qing left the shop, considering the possibility of clearing one more abyss before the day ended. As he walked, lost in thought, a group of men dressed in black approached him. They were none other than the debt collectors. A bald man stepped forward, remarking that it had only been a few days since their last encounter, yet Ye Qing's aura had completely changed. He asked if Ye Qing had stumbled upon some treasure while scavenging for trash. The man added that he had been searching for Ye Qing for some time and had nearly reported him as missing to their boss. Before the man could continue, Ye Qing interrupted, firmly stating that all his debts, including interest, had been paid in full. He told them there was no reason to bother him any longer. Hearing this, the bald man signaled for the others to back off. As they stepped away, he moved closer to Ye Qing and reminded him that although his debt had been cleared, his work contract remained active. He warned Ye Qing not to forget that someone like him, a trash picker, would always live the life of a trash picker, nothing more. The bald man sneered at Ye Qing, telling him to stop pretending to be something he wasn't. Calling him a lowlife, he suddenly knocked the container out of Ye Qing's hand. As the liquid splattered across the ground, the man accused Ye Qing of being blind, claiming he had spilled the drink all over him. He warned Ye Qing that there would be consequences for challenging a B-rank job changer, especially since Ye Qing was nothing more than a level 0 scavenger. The other men stepped forward, eager to punish Ye Qing. They had always found him unpleasant and saw this as the perfect opportunity. Ye Qing quickly assessed the situation. He reminded himself of the supervision regulations for job changers, which strictly prohibited the use of abilities outside the abyss. Only law enforcers and special armed personnel were permitted to activate their powers in public spaces. Realizing he needed an advantage, Ye Qing scanned the area for a blind spot in the security cameras. If he could avoid detection, he could activate his recycling and regeneration abilities without violating the rules. As Ye Qing considered his next move, the bald man stepped closer and sneered at him. He mockingly assigned Ye Qing the task of licking the spilled milk tea off the ground, calling it a fitting job for a trash picker. Laughing loudly, he ridiculed Ye Qing, calling it a rare opportunity someone like him shouldn't waste. Irritated by the man's condescending words, Ye Qing refused without hesitation. The bald man's expression darkened with fury as he prepared to strike Ye Qing. Just as he was about to attack, an unfamiliar figure suddenly appeared. Rodrigo, an S-rank member of the Blood Oath hunting group, seized the bald man by the arm. The bald man's bravado vanished, replaced by fear as he recognized Rodrigo. Rodrigo calmly asked if the bald man had gathered enough people for the upcoming Abyss expedition. Panicked, the bald man stammered that they were still one person short. Rodrigo immediately pressed him for the location of the missing recruit. Before the bald man could respond, Rodrigo's eyes caught sight of Ye Qing quietly slipping away. Without hesitation, Rodrigo called out to Ye Qing, announcing that he was hired. The bald man quickly objected, telling Rodrigo that Ye Qing was nothing more than a trash picker. He insisted that Rodrigo needed someone capable of holding their own and promised to find a more suitable candidate immediately. Rodrigo dismissed the protest, explaining that under the Red Moon state, the monsters in the abyss would become extremely vicious. What he required wasn't strength but someone expendable, cannon fodder to draw attention and take hits. As long as the person could fulfill that role, their abilities didn't matter. Hearing Rodrigo mention the Red Moon, Ye Qing's thoughts shifted. He recalled that during a red moon, abyss monsters entered a berserk state, and rare monsters would respawn. The rewards for slaying them would double, and the magic crystals they dropped would be of a higher purity. A confident smile crossed Ye Qing's face. Recognizing the opportunity, he told Rodrigo he was willing to join the raid. Rodrigo, pleased by Ye Qing's response, accepted without hesitation. Rodrigo then called the rest of the group together. As the team assembled, Ye Qing noticed a familiar figure approaching. It was the man he had encountered in the first dungeon, the same one who had used his team as bait to escape, only to be stopped by Ye Qing. Ye Qing had not only foiled his escape but had also absorbed all of his abilities. The man was about to confront Ye Qing, but before he could speak, Ye Qing grabbed him and pulled him aside to a more secluded spot. Within moments, it was just the two of them. The man's anger flared as he glared at Ye Qing, furious over what had been done to him. Ye Qing, unfazed by his reaction, calmly explained that if he hadn't borrowed everyone's strength during the abyss encounter, none of them would have made it out alive. He told the man that he owed his survival to Ye Qing's actions. Before the man could respond, Rodrigo suddenly appeared out of nowhere, asking if the two knew each other. Without hesitation, Ye Qing denied any connection between them. Rodrigo smirked, remarking that it made sense. He couldn't imagine someone who abandoned his teammates to die ever having real friends. With that, Rodrigo walked away. Once Rodrigo was gone, Ye Qing turned to the man and asked how he had managed to escape the abyss. The man explained that the committee had initially planned to sentence him to 15 years, but he had sacrificed all his assets and paid a fine of 1.5 million to secure his freedom. He made it clear that everything he had lost was because of Ye Qing. Now penniless and stripped of his levels, the man had no choice but to start over as cannon fodder. He threatened Ye Qing, demanding repayment or he would report him to the World Committee. Ye Qing's expression darkened at the threat. He challenged the man to repeat himself and warned that if he dared to follow through, Ye Qing would make sure to recycle him, turning him into nothing more than leftovers. In the bustling subway of City C, a group of hunters were getting ready to explore a dungeon. Zhou Tong, a level 3 bard, greeted Ye Qing and welcomed him to their team of adventurers dubbed the Cannon Fodder. Curious about Ye Qing's role, Zhou Tong asked what he did. Ye Qing, a level 1 scavenger, replied modestly. Qin Xingdian, a level 1 mage who had been with Ye Qing earlier, introduced himself as well. Zhou Tong reassured everyone that it's normal to start at the bottom and there was no need to mock each other as they were all there to risk their lives for money, and there's nothing nobler than that. Ye Qing silently agreed, figuring this mismatched group would stick together. Zhou Tong then introduced 2 more team members to Ye Qing and stressed the need for a leader. Since he was the highest level among them, Zhou Tong appointed himself as leader. Lao Zhu, a level 2 hunter, and Lao Zhang, a level 3 hunter-warrior, agreed with Zhou Tong's decision without hesitation. Just then, Rodrigo stepped forward to announce something important. He informed everyone that, alongside the 6 main members of the Blood Oath, there would be 5 temporary members joining them this time. One of the Blood Oath members cautioned Rodrigo not to speak too highly of the cannon fodders, describing them as bait to reduce their own risks. Rodrigo went on to explain the nature of the abyss they were about to enter, a maze filled with traps in every room. He tasked the cannon fodders with finding the path to the boss room as quickly as possible and returning with that crucial information for the main team. He jokingly mentioned that he didn't expect them to be skilled in combat, so if they encountered monsters, their best bet was to run away. Serious now, Rodrigo laid out the terms: for the cannon fodders to earn any share of the reward, at least one of them must survive. If only one made it out alive, they would claim all the rewards. At that moment, Lao Zhang asked Lao Zhu how he was feeling. Lao Zhu confessed that he couldn't hold back any longer. He had 4 daughters eagerly waiting for dinner at home, and he desperately needed the money. Lao Zhang shared that his wife was very ill and required expensive treatment, which compelled him to take the risk and join the mission for the money. After Rodrigo's instructions, the group entered the abyss. As they walked, Lao Zhang noticed Ye Qing, a newcomer, and mentioned it to Lao Zu. Lao Zu remarked that newcomer was common among cannon fodder groups, as few ever made it out alive from the abyss, requiring constant replacements. Lao Zhang however clarified that he meant something different. Ye Qing seemed unusually calm and confident for a cannon fodder. All 5 cannon fodders were now inside the dungeon. After a while, Zhou Tong remarked on the lack of monsters despite their long trek. Chen Xingdian nervously warned Zhou Tong not to jinx their luck. Suddenly, the temperature dropped, and Zhou Tong regretted not wearing warmer clothes. As they continued, Zhou Tong accidentally triggered a trap, causing a large axe to swing down. Ye Qing reacted swiftly, saving Zhou Tong from harm. Zhou Tong didn't realize the danger until he felt a slight bump on the head. Turning around, he saw the axe on the ground. An annoyed Chen Xingdian blamed Zhou Tong for setting off the trap, while Ye Qing quietly wondered how Zhou Tong had survived so long with such carelessness. Zhou Tong admitted luck played a big role and urged everyone to keep moving. As they moved forward cautiously, creatures covered in webs suddenly dropped from the dungeon ceiling. Zhou Tong dodged quickly but soon panicked, retreating behind the group. They cautiously observed the creatures, which unexpectedly burst into action: demonic spiders, elite level 5 monsters capable of spitting venom. Zhou Tong, visibly frightened, recognized them as one of his greatest fears. At that moment, Chen Xingdian activated his burn ability, hoping to scorch the spiders, but their elite strength rendered his attack ineffective. As they battled, a spider lunged towards Ye Qing, aiming to bite his leg, but he swiftly countered with a devastating kick that severed the spider's head from its body. Chen Xingdian, seeing this, grew annoyed at what he thought was Ye Qing's arrogance, dismissing him as just an ability stealer. Unfazed, Ye Qing recycled the spider's corpse, gaining an attribute point and discovering a rare material known as Arcana. This Arcana was a weapon that could poison opponents, boosting damage by 120% on critical hits. Intrigued, Ye Qing realized that recycling corpses could yield not only skill and job cards but also Arcana cards that enhanced equipment. Meanwhile, realizing his lack of combat abilities, Zhou Tong, a level 3 bard, focused on buffing his fellow cannon fodders. However, his clumsy nature led to an unintended buff on the spiders, making them stronger. One of the buffed spiders charged at Zhou Tong, threatening his life. Reacting quickly, Ye Qing intervened and swiftly eliminated the spider with a single precise strike. Impressed by Ye Qing's prowess, the other hunters watched in astonishment as he effortlessly eliminated the remaining spiders attacking them. They were amazed that a cannon fodder possessed such formidable strength, capable of handling the monsters alone. Ye Qing quietly considered the demonized spider's poison resistance, realizing why the quenching poison arcana was extracted from them. He understood that using such arcana on himself wouldn't show immediate effects due to their resilience, but their physical strength was remarkable. Meanwhile, Zhou Tong believed his buff had contributed to Ye Qing's newfound strength, his only ability as a bard. The spiders, having witnessed Ye Qing's skill, hesitated to attack him. Ye Qing knew their intelligence meant they wouldn't confront an unbeatable opponent, so they withdrew. The other hunters breathed a sigh of relief at the spiders' retreat, acknowledging Ye Qing's pivotal role in their survival even in the first room. Ye Qing continued recycling the slain spiders, accumulating numerous basic points. He used most of them and reserved one quenching poison card for later use. As their leader, Zhou Tong urged the group forward now that the monsters had withdrawn, cautioning them to avoid triggering any more traps. Ye Qing couldn't help but feel puzzled, knowing that the traps triggered earlier had been due to Zhou Tong's actions. As they moved deeper into the dungeon, Ye Qing spotted a hidden door leading to a new area, possibly created by the influence of the red moon, causing new branches to form. Curious and hopeful of finding valuable items, Ye Qing decided to explore this unknown territory. He summoned a blood nightmare clone of himself to join the group while he ventured into the new area alone. Upon entering, the area appeared brighter than the previous one, but Ye Qing's exploration was suddenly interrupted by a ferocious monster attack. This spider-like creature was far stronger than any he had encountered before, with thick defenses that nullified his attacks. It struck Ye Qing forcefully with its leg, sending him flying back. Using his observing eye, Ye Qing identified the creature as a broodmother, a level 20 monster. Instead of fear, Ye Qing felt excitement at encountering such a rare elite creature. If he could defeat it, there was potential to obtain valuable recyclable items. Reacting swiftly to the broodmother's web attack, Ye Qing dodged and countered with his great flame explosion ability, aiming for its head. Infuriated, the monster retaliated by shooting iron-hard webs capable of lethal damage. Ye Qing realized his fire-based attacks were useless against the monster's immunity, so he switched to his dagger, delivering a critical strike that caused the broodmother intense pain. Ye Qing noticed a surprising weakness. While lower-level demonized spiders were venomous, higher-level broodmothers lacked this trait, potentially due to their focus on defense and breeding tactics. Using a poisonous dagger, Ye Qing exploited this vulnerability, causing the poison to spread rapidly through the creature's body. As the broodmother ensnared Ye Qing in its web, immobilizing him, Ye Qing activated his berserk ability. Harnessing a surge of strength, he broke free and confronted the creature head-on. With a devastating blow empowered by Berserk, he caused the broodmother's body to explode in defeat. Victorious, Ye Qing gained an opportunity to enhance his Berserk ability with a new card called Splattering Gore, which increased its effectiveness but came with the risk of draining his health over time. Unconcerned due to his regeneration ability, which healed him continuously, Ye Qing embraced the enhanced Berserk mode. Additionally, defeating the broodmother yielded new abilities and equipment. Ye Qing opted to recycle the equipment of lesser value and kept those likely to fetch higher prices outside the dungeon. Through recycling, he acquired a new card ability called Broodmother, allowing him to summon up to 4 evolving demonized broodlings to fight alongside him based on their combat experience. Impressed by the strength of his new ability, Ye Qing looked forward to employing it strategically in future battles. As the hunters continued exploring the dungeon, they stumbled upon a deep mine within the abyss. Inside, they found highly concentrated S-rank magic crystals, a rare discovery that could fetch a fortune. They speculated whether the crystals were influenced by the Red Moon's effects. Lao Tzu used his tool, the Eye of Argos, which marked a 60-meter radius on their map, alerting nearby adventurers to the presence of the valuable crystals. Chen Xingdian, seeing this, grew angry and called Lao Tzu stupid. He argued that with these crystals, they could live in luxury for the rest of their lives, questioning why Lao Tzu had exposed their find to others outside the dungeon. Lao Tzu calmly explained that if the hunters outside discovered they were hoarding the treasure, they would face severe consequences. Lao Zhang chimed in, reminding Chen that as cannon fodder, their role was to clear paths for higher-ranking adventurers. Dying in the dungeon would likely be dismissed as accidental, without anyone batting an eye. Chen, though irritated by their words, knew they were right. He blamed Ye Qing for weakening him by stealing his abilities. Despite losing levels, Chen was determined to earn cash and improve his gear to join the main scavenging teams. In a moment of distraction and greed, Chen contemplated sneaking some crystals out of the dungeon. Suddenly, disaster struck, a trap activated, and a laser-like beam shot through Lao Tzu's head, instantly killing him. The remaining hunters stood shocked and bewildered by the unexpected attack. The incident left them shaken and cautious as they realized the dangers lurking within the dungeon. They mourned Lao Tzu's death and contemplated their next moves, knowing they must tread carefully to survive and navigate the treacherous depths of the abyss. Meanwhile, Ye Qing focused on nurturing his newly summoned demonized broodling. Starting as a small level 1 creature, Ye Qing aimed to evolve it into a formidable level 5 demonized spider using basic points. He knew the broodling had potential to grow and assist him in battling monsters. After feeding it basic points, the broodling swiftly evolved into a silk spider and learned a new skill called spider web. On the other side of the abyss, Lao Zhang stood in shock at Lao Tzu's lifeless body on the ground. Chen Xingdian hastily claimed it was an accident, but Lao Zhang was far from satisfied. He lashed out at Chen, blaming his greed for Lao Zu's death. Grabbing Chen by the neck, Lao Zhang angrily reminded him that Lao Zu was the sole provider for his family, working tirelessly. Due to Chen's actions, Lao Zu's family now faced uncertain futures. Chen Xingdian retorted, shouting that he needed money to survive outside the abyss. He mourned his fall from grace, from a higher level to working with lower-ranked cannon fodder. Lao Zhang couldn't comprehend Chen's lack of remorse. He drew his weapon, accusing Chen of being a team killer. In response, Chen defended himself, arguing that in this harsh world, power and wealth were the only measures of value. He rebelliously stated that they were all in the same struggle for survival, where sacrifices were sometimes inevitable. Amidst their argument, the hunters were startled by applause behind them. Turning around, they saw Rodrigo approaching with a sinister smile. He complimented Chen Xingdian's worldview and offered him a spot in his Blood Oath clan, mentioning they had room for one more. A member of Rodrigo's group noted that Lao Zu's body was still warm, indicating he had just died. Rodrigo brushed off Lao Zu's death as common in the deadly dungeon, where only the strong survived. He emphasized that risking one's life for money was nothing to be ashamed of, especially with the rare S-rank magic crystals appearing during the Red Moon. As Rodrigo spoke, he approached Chen Xingdian, placing a hand on his shoulder and insinuating that claiming one of the crystals required sacrificing a worthless life. Chen Xingdian trembled in fear at Rodrigo's evil words. Rodrigo's clan members drew their weapons, instructing the remaining hunters, now reduced to 4, to gather the magic crystals from the walls. They threatened to kill anyone who tried to escape. Lao Zhang warned them that triggering traps could kill them, but his pleas were ignored. Reluctantly, Lao Zhang began picking up the crystals, but just as he reached for one, he dropped to his knees, begging for mercy. He confessed he had only taken this dangerous job to pay off debts from gambling. Rodrigo mocked Lao Zhang, calling him useless. Meanwhile, Chen Xingdian contemplated escaping, but he knew Rodrigo's strength far surpassed his own. Even at full power, he wouldn't stand a chance against Rodrigo. Instead, Chen Xingdian approached Rodrigo and asked if the offer to join Blood Oath was still open. Rodrigo, momentarily forgetful, had one of his members confirm his earlier offer. Once confirmed, Chen Xingdian eagerly moved closer, only to receive a brutal kick to the head from Rodrigo. Rodrigo mocked Chen Xingdian for believing his lies, declaring him unworthy of joining his elite group. He taunted Chen Xingdian as a team killer, destined for death, and claimed his life now served only to collect crystals. Rodrigo threatened to kill all the hunters and turn them into controlled corpses to gather the crystals. Just as tensions peaked, Ye Qing's clone disappeared, and the real Ye Qing appeared. He listened to Rodrigo's threats and grew displeased. Approaching the crystals, Ye Qing confidently removed one without triggering any trap. Everyone was stunned and puzzled by this unexpected outcome. Rodrigo speculated that Ye Qing must have an extraordinarily high luck stat, possibly around 60, which prevented the traps from activating. He marveled at how a low-level player like Ye Qing could have such luck. Rodrigo's suspicion intensified when another clan member tried to take a crystal and was instantly killed by a trap. Convinced that Ye Qing possessed a rare trait related to his job, Rodrigo changed his plans. He no longer needed the other hunters. Now, only Ye Qing's luck could ensure success. Rodrigo declared his new intention to eliminate the remaining hunters. They stood helpless, caught in Rodrigo's ruthless scheme, while Ye Qing pondered his next move. Rodrigo commanded his Blood Oath members to ensure no cannon fodder escaped. Lao Zhang felt hopeless against these seasoned hunters, realizing their chances were slim. They were thinking of fleeing. Suddenly, Chen Xingdian ran away, abandoning them. Ye Qing was surprised by Chen's retreat. Now, their numerical advantage vanished, leaving them short-handed. Ye Qing, however, remained composed. He summoned 4 creatures he had recently recycled, a quartet of low-level monsters that responded to his call. Shou Tong, initially alarmed by the sight of these creatures, relaxed as Ye Qing assured him they were allies. With a cool demeanor, Ye Qing activated his observing eye, analyzing their foes. A level 20 necromancer, a fierce level 17 berserker, 2 seasoned level 18 hunters, and a resilient level 19 paladin stood against them. Ye Qing wasn't sure how his monsters stacked up against these seasoned fighters, but he felt a glimmer of confidence in his abilities. When Ye Qing attempted to assess Rodrigo's strength, he found himself puzzled. Rodrigo's power seemed to match his own, a revelation that surprised Ye Qing and made him wary of their leader. Rodrigo admired Ye Qing's ability to control abyssal monsters, noting his unexpected skills. However, the monsters Ye Qing summoned were only level 10, much weaker than the Blood Oath members. Rodrigo instructed his team to eliminate Ye Qing's monsters without damaging the crystals. Ye Qing realized protecting the cannon fodders and fighting the Blood Oath would be tough. He urged the others to flee in Xiandian's direction if they wanted to live. Lao Zhang thought Ye Qing was foolish for stalling, but he saw a chance to survive and ran. Shou Tong, grateful to Ye Qing, promised to remember his sacrifice before running off. As they fled, misfortune struck Shou Tong, the ceiling collapsed, blocking their path. Lao Zhang was furious, but Shou Tong couldn't help his bad luck. They were now trapped, forced to confront the approaching Blood Oath members. On the other side, the members of the Blood Oath were locked in a fierce battle against Ye Qing's minions. One of the Blood Oath members was about to strike down a minion when it shot sticky webbing from its mouth, catching the hunter off guard. Seizing the opportunity, Ye Qing attacked the distracted hunter with his dagger, but the skilled warrior managed to block the blow just in time. "I'm a level 19 paladin," the hunter declared confidently, "much stronger than your level 1 self. You can't defeat me." With a swift move, the paladin attempted a shield bash, but Ye Qing agilely dodged the attack. Knowing his level 10 spiders could only disrupt their ranks but not defeat them outright, Ye Qing strategized quickly. Ye Qing dashed behind the paladin with incredible speed and slashed at his legs with his dagger. He was moments away from finishing the paladin off when 2 other hunters intervened, firing arrows at Ye Qing. To everyone's surprise, Ye Qing managed to dodge and block each arrow skillfully. The hunters were amazed at his speed and reflexes. Taking advantage of the distraction caused by the arrows, Ye Qing unleashed his Great Flame Explosion ability, causing the ground to erupt beneath the hunters. They narrowly evaded the fiery blast, realizing that dealing with Ye Qing was going to be much more challenging than they had anticipated. Just as Ye Qing's monsters seemed overwhelming, a berserker stormed in and began attacking them fiercely. With swift and powerful strikes, he swiftly dealt with the monsters and then turned towards Shou Tong and Lao Zhang, intending to finish them off. Shou Tong thought it was the end, but just as the berserker was about to strike him down, Lao Zhang stepped in, using his shield to block the attack. He blamed Shou Tong for their predicament, urging him to stand and fight. Before Shou Tong could respond, the berserker launched another attack. Lao Zhang tried to defend with a shield, but the blow was too strong, knocking him backwards. The berserker advanced towards Lao Zhang to deliver the final blow. In a moment of resignation, Lao Zhang shouted defiantly that he was prepared to die, finally free from his burdens and debts. The berserker raised his sword to strike, but suddenly found himself unable to move. Confused, he looked back and saw that Shou Tong had immobilized them both with his ability. Shou Tong, struggling to control his powers, mistakenly froze not only the berserker but also Lao Zhang. Meanwhile, Ye Qing observed the scene with confusion, unsure of what was happening. As Ye Qing watched the battle, a necromancer approached and warned him about the limits of his powers despite their strength. Ye Qing realized summoning his minions had drained a lot of his mana. He quickly drank a mana potion from his bag to replenish his energy, which puzzled the necromancer. The necromancer scoffed at Ye Qing's potion, remarking that even with restored mana, it would be too late to save him. Disregarding the necromancer's saying, Ye Qing used his ability to absorb and recycle the corpses summoned by the necromancer. Confused, the necromancer watched his undead minions disappear. With his mana fully restored, Ye Qing swiftly attacked the necromancer, landing a solid blow to his face. Watching from the sidelines, Rodrigo, impressed by Ye Qing's tactics, took an interest in him. However, Ye Qing disagreed with Rodrigo's ruthless approach of sacrificing lives for gain. Offended by Ye Qing's stance, Rodrigo dismissed him as mere cannon fodder, asserting that only ruthless individuals could thrive in the harsh world. He declared that those opposing him would perish in the dungeon, and that one side would emerge victorious while the other would be destroyed. Ye Qing chuckled when Rodrigo threatened him and said he didn't understand his words. Ye Qing believed everyone should enter and leave the abyss safely. Rodrigo mocked Ye Qing's optimism and immediately attacked with a powerful punch, knocking Ye Qing back. Ye Qing realized Rodrigo was the strongest opponent he had faced. Unbothered, Rodrigo attacked again, but Ye Qing dodged his blow. Rodrigo shouted that nothing could stand against his strength. Their battle intensified, each trying to prove themselves in the dangerous abyss. While on the other side, just as Zhou Tong's spell began to fade, the berserker broke free and lunged at him, intent on finishing him off before he could cast it again. Just as the berserker swung his sword towards Zhou Tong, Lao Zhang intervened, grappling the berserker from behind. He urged Zhou Tong to act quickly while he had the berserker restrained. Before Zhou Tong could react, however, the berserker overpowered Lao Zhang, tossing him aside and slashing his sword across Lao Zhang's stomach. Lao Zhang cried out in pain, calling desperately for Zhou Tong's help and reminding him of his role as their leader. Zhou Tong's mind raced back to when he had insisted on leading their ragtag group, believing his level 3 bard skills made him the best choice. He had hoped leadership would spare him from direct combat and hide his incompetence. Now, on his knees before the berserker, he begged for mercy, admitting his weakness and pleading for his life. Memories flooded Zhou Tong's mind of his previous failures in another team. He had been ridiculed for his inability to inflict damage and criticized for his buff spells often going awry. Eventually, his teammates had expelled him, leaving him feeling worthless and alone. Reflecting on these memories, Zhou Tong recalled sitting alone on the dungeon steps when Rodrigo approached him. Rodrigo had asked about his abilities, and Zhou Tong had reluctantly admitted to being just a level 3 bard. To Zhou Tong's surprise, Rodrigo had extended an invitation to join their dungeon raid, offering him a chance for redemption and adventure. In the midst of their battle, Ye Qing found himself outmatched by Rodrigo. A powerful blow slammed Ye Qing against the wall, leaving him reeling from the impact. Rodrigo then unleashed a technique learned from the martial artist Song Wang Jin, designed to inflict continuous damage to vital organs. If Ye Qing used magic now, the injury would worsen, possibly leading to his sudden death. It was a devastating combat move, capable of crippling even the most skilled magic users. Fortunately, Ye Qing managed to dodge the lethal strike just in time. Now on the defensive, he had to quickly devise a strategy to counter Rodrigo's relentless attacks. He knew he couldn't afford to make any mistakes against such a formidable opponent. As Ye Qing evaded Rodrigo's relentless pursuit, he searched for an opening to turn the tide of battle. With every dodge and parry, he calculated his next move carefully, trying to outwit Rodrigo's aggressive fighting style. In the midst of their intense battle, Ye Qing suddenly noticed something and urgently called out to Zhou Tong. But before he could finish his call, Rodrigo closed in on Ye Qing with a devastating attack that sent him flying back, crashing near Zhou Tong. Lying on the ground, Ye Qing spoke to Zhou Tong, emphasizing that dwelling on past weaknesses and hoping for pity from others was futile. Ye Qing understood Zhou Tong's struggles deeply. He too had yearned for power more than anyone, grappling with his own shortcomings while battling monsters. Despite feeling useless at times, Ye Qing never considered running from challenges. He told Zhou Tong that fear of physical weakness was insignificant compared to the danger of a weak spirit. Ye Qing shared how he faced countless life-threatening situations and often found himself overpowered, but he never gave up. Despite his physical limitations, his resolve remained unwavering. He likened himself to a king in the making, despite his humble beginnings as a trash picker. Zhou Tong listened intently to Ye Qing's words. He pondered his own situation, realizing that without strength, he would not survive. He vowed not to hide behind teammates anymore but to grow stronger for himself. He resolved to no longer shy away from challenges but to forge his own path to strength. Upon hearing Zhou Tong's declaration, the berserker scoffed and mocked him, claiming that a mere level 3 support could never penetrate his level 17 armor, no matter how hard he tried. But in that moment, a fire ignited within Zhou Tong. Determination surged through him like never before. He discarded his sword and grasped a microphone, shouting into it to activate his special ability. The air around them crackled with newfound power as Zhou Tong's ability surged, greatly boosting Ye Qing's strength beyond what anyone expected. Witnesses were stunned by Zhou Tong's unexpected display of power, except for Ye Qing, who had anticipated the outcome. With a smile, Ye Qing proclaimed Zhou Tong to be the greatest support he had ever encountered. Empowered by Zhou Tong's ability, Ye Qing accessed his own unique skill, Inspiration, which amplified all his skills and attributes to unprecedented levels. With a swift command, Ye Qing summoned a blood nightmare, a dark creature that morphed into a perfect replica of himself. The clone immediately lunged at the berserker, entwining itself around his body. The berserker's confident demeanor turned to fear-stricken screams as the blood nightmare tightened its grip, squeezing the life out of him. The berserker writhed in agony as the relentless grip of the blood nightmare tightened around him, each second bringing him closer to his demise. The dungeon echoed with his cries, marking the swift turn of fortunes brought by Zhou Tong and Ye Qing's coordinated assault. At that moment, Rodrigo launched a powerful attack towards Ye Qing, but with Zhou Tong's buff enhancing his magical regeneration, Ye Qing managed to evade the blow. The increased magic in his body allowed him to heal faster from Rodrigo's earlier damage, making the fight against Rodrigo less hard than before. Sensing an opportunity, Ye Qing activated his berserk mode and unleashed his ability splattering gore, aiming directly at Rodrigo. The devastating attack shattered Rodrigo's armor, much to his shock. He couldn't believe a level 1 like Ye Qing could breach his defenses. Ye Qing knew the attack's special effect ignored armor, but it came at a cost. Each use accelerated his blood loss. He resolved to end the fight swiftly before his condition worsened. Rodrigo remained unfazed, intrigued that a mere level 1 trash picker could challenge him. Determined not to be overshadowed in skill, Rodrigo launched a powerful punch that landed squarely on Ye Qing's frame. He taunted Ye Qing, emphasizing the stark difference in their strength and boasting about his preference for pure destructive power over more weaker styles. With a surge of determination, Rodrigo unleashed his signature move, the instant-kill heavy breaking punch, propelling Ye Qing through the air. Yet, undeterred by the forceful impact, Ye Qing swiftly regained his footing. Rodrigo laughed at Ye Qing's resilience, asserting his dominance and prowess. Ye Qing, unfazed by Rodrigo's taunts, focused all his remaining energy into bolstering his strength. Instantly, his muscles visibly swelled as his strength surged to new heights. Rodrigo charged at Ye Qing, undeterred by Ye Qing's increased strength, confident that he could still overpower him. He unleashed a powerful attack, but at the same moment, Ye Qing retaliated with equal force. Their attacks collided, yet Ye Qing's proved superior, sending Rodrigo hurtling backwards with his hands visibly damaged. Shock registered on Rodrigo's face as he realized someone could match his power. Unbothered by Rodrigo's astonishment, Ye Qing pressed forward, relentless in his assault. He informed Rodrigo that there was no time to be surprised, as the battle was about to end. Ye Qing seized Rodrigo by the head, ready to deliver the finishing blow. Rodrigo flashed back to 8 years ago when he was just a low-ranking member among hunters. They often made him clean equipment dirted from battling monsters. One senior hunter laughed at Rodrigo's aspirations, reminded him of the rule among the lion-hearted hunters: the weak were only fit for menial tasks like shining shoes. To earn his place as an official member, Rodrigo had to prove himself worthy. Another hunter chuckled, joking that Rodrigo seemed destined to remain cannon fodder forever. Determined to prove them wrong, Rodrigo worked tirelessly to climb out of the novice ranks. But during one monster battle, despite his determination, Rodrigo faced a creature too powerful for him. He bravely confronted it, but was quickly overwhelmed and left severely injured. In the aftermath, Rodrigo found himself in a lab, surrounded by doctors assessing his extensive injuries: a shattered mandible, 8 broken ribs, pierced heart and liver, and damaged kidneys. The medical equipment on him hinted at advanced abyssal technology, capable of using magic crystals to extract and transplant cells from abyssal creatures into human bodies. One doctor, noting Rodrigo's DNA similarity to monsters, delivered both good and bad news. He could survive thanks to the abyssal technology, but at the cost of no longer being fully human. Rodrigo had become a hybrid, part human and part monster. The doctor's laughter sounded bitter as he revealed this startling truth to Rodrigo. Following his recovery, Rodrigo was escorted to the chamber of the Lionheart clan's leader. Standing before the formidable leader, Rodrigo was informed that he had proven himself worthy of becoming an official member. The leader handed Rodrigo a badge, symbolizing his new status within the clan, but also made it clear that Rodrigo was now an auxiliary and servant to the leader. Grateful yet puzzled, Rodrigo asked about his teammates. To his dismay, the leader revealed that he had disposed of Rodrigo's entire team, deeming them useless. Shocked and betrayed by this revelation, Rodrigo struggled to comprehend the harsh reality. With a cold demeanor, the leader explained that in this world, the weak were destined to be swallowed up unless they could prove their worth. They would be treated as disposable, mere trash to be discarded. In that crucial moment, Rodrigo's memories flooded back, snapping him back to consciousness. With a surge of determination, he unleashed his full power. His defense, speed, and destructive capabilities surged far beyond their previous limits. Grasping Ye Qing's hand, Rodrigo delivered a devastating blow that sent Ye Qing reeling backward. Rodrigo's body, enhanced by transplanted monster organs and fueled by absorbed magic crystals, tapped into unprecedented power. The pure magic crystals were especially potent under the Blood Moon's influence, synergizing perfectly with Rodrigo's transformation. Consuming the crystals, Rodrigo's strength skyrocketed, surpassing even the dungeon's boss level. The system recognized his transformation, now marking him as a boss monster rather than a mere human. With a loud roar, Rodrigo faced Ye Qing, mocking him for the path to power, giving up humanity to become a ruthless monster. He launched into an attack, hurling huge boulders at Ye Qing. Though Ye Qing tried to dodge quickly, Rodrigo's monstrous shape made it harder to avoid getting hit. Zhou Tong acknowledged Ye Qing's strength but doubted if he could match Rodrigo's sheer power. Rodrigo's punches were potentially lethal to Ye Qing. Rodrigo proclaimed that in the world of strength, the weak bow down to the strong, a harsh truth that drove him to embrace his monstrous form for power. Intent on avenging the failed mission for the magic crystals, Rodrigo targeted Zhou Tong, gripping his neck tightly. Just as Rodrigo prepared to strike, he felt a presence behind him. Turning around, he faced Ye Qing, who had powered up again by drinking another potion to restore his strength. Unable to see through Rodrigo's defenses with his observing eye skill, Ye Qing relied on his Blood Nightmare's abilities to uncover hidden insights from Rodrigo's body. Ye Qing explained that while the Berserker's skills had temporarily boosted his own strength, the toll was severe, a 30-second exhaustion period. In contrast, Rodrigo's transformation blurred the line between human and monster, extending his reach even into the dungeon itself, with the abyss demanding its due from him. Rodrigo chuckled at Ye Qing's remark, insisting that his newfound power was his own achievement, unrelated to the abyss. However, at that very moment, the repercussions of tapping into dungeon energies began to manifest on Rodrigo's body. His right hand morphed grotesquely, losing its human appearance and transforming into a more monstrous form. Rodrigo, realizing what was happening, grew furious that Ye Qing's warning seemed to be coming true. In his rage, Rodrigo lunged at Ye Qing. Yet, as his body became larger and more monstrous, his agility suffered greatly. Ye Qing easily evaded Rodrigo's clumsy attacks. During the battle, Ye Qing wished he had a weapon. Suddenly, Zhou Tong shouted and threw his dagger to Ye Qing. Ye Qing caught it skillfully, now armed and prepared to seriously hurt Rodrigo. Ye Qing swiftly maneuvered behind Rodrigo, slashing his back with the dagger and dealing significant damage. Each strike was a critical hit, surprising Rodrigo. Ye Qing taunted Rodrigo, mocking his inability to keep up with someone he considered trash, despite Rodrigo's enhanced agility. Rodrigo, enraged by Ye Qing's words, warned that humiliating him would only lead to a worse fate for Ye Qing. he asserted his superiority over Ye Qing, claiming a higher existence. However, Ye Qing disagreed, seeing Rodrigo merely as a human-turned monster who had borrowed power to become stronger. Over time, Rodrigo's transformation progressed, losing more of his human form and becoming increasingly monstrous. Ye Qing observed this irreversible change, realizing Rodrigo was now fully consumed by his monstrous nature. At that moment, Ye Qing taunted Rodrigo by mentioning the abyss calling him, which only fueled Rodrigo's growing rage and monstrous transformation. He screamed in fury, haunted by memories of being treated poorly and desperate to prove his worth. Meanwhile, a message appeared before Ye Qing, presenting a challenge: defeat Rodrigo without killing him to earn a rare reward. Ye Qing hesitated, knowing it would be hard to subdue Rodrigo without causing harm, especially with Rodrigo's teammates likely to intervene. But, attracted and curious by the promise of the rare reward, Ye Qing decided to accept the challenge and face the difficult task ahead. Ye Qing thought to himself that Rodrigo, in his current state, had no chance of making it out alive. He believed that even Rodrigo's own teammates wouldn't let him go so easily if they saw him like this. As these thoughts crossed Ye Qing's mind, the blood nightmare emerged from his body. In that brief moment, it reminded Ye Qing to remember its words, urging him to find a way to get Rodrigo's attention. The blood nightmare assured him that 5 seconds would be enough for it to take action and strike Rodrigo. Ye Qing, however, immediately dismissed the idea. Without hesitation, he told the blood nightmare that killing Rodrigo wasn't necessary. The blood nightmare, along with Zhou Tong, was taken aback by Ye Qing's response. Ye Qing then calmly explained that monsters belonged in the abyss, and monsters could not leave the abyss. Those like Rodrigo, who had abandoned their humanity and descended into the abyss, would be welcomed by it with open arms. This, Ye Qing said, was the natural law of the abyss. He went on to remark that during the blood moon, it was believed that monsters would enter a berserk state, but in truth, it was not the monsters that surrendered to madness, it was the people. As Ye Qing spoke, Rodrigo lost all control over his mind, his consciousness consumed by the abyss. Fully transformed into a monster of the abyss, Rodrigo fled the scene, vanishing into the shadows. Elsewhere, Chen was assessing the situation he found himself in. The chaos surrounding him was undeniable, but he convinced himself that if he could survive the abyss, great fortunes awaited him. His confidence soared as he stumbled upon a treasure chest overflowing with riches. In that moment, he believed his time had finally come to claim his share of fortune. The sight of the treasure before him felt like the key to freedom, new equipment, and a fresh identity. As Chen reveled in his newfound luck, unaware of the danger lurking behind him, Rodrigo, now a monstrous shell of his former self, silently approached. Oblivious to the threat, Chen fixated on the treasure, envisioning how it would change his fate. Before he could act on his dreams, Rodrigo struck from behind, ending Chen's life in an instant. Moments later, Ye Qing and Zhou Tong found themselves outside the abyss, sitting in a bar. Zhou Tong bowed his head toward Ye Qing, his expression filled with sincerity. Lowering his gaze, he asked for permission to address Ye Qing as his boss, vowing to follow him from that moment forward. Hearing Zhou Tong's request, Ye Qing looked troubled. He hesitated, explaining that he couldn't accept such a responsibility. Despite his reluctance, Zhou Tong pressed on, revealing that ever since he had heard Ye Qing declare his lifelong ambition to become a king, he had been determined to follow him for the rest of his life. Ye Qing's discomfort grew as he tried to explain that his earlier words had been nothing more than an attempt to appear impressive. Reflecting on it now, he admitted that he had simply been speaking nonsense at the time. However, Zhou Tong refused to accept this, dismissing Ye Qing's attempts to downplay his influence. He insisted that it was only through Ye Qing's encouragement that he had been able to discover his own worth and the goals he now strived to achieve. Ye Qing, after hearing Zhou Tong's words, asked him about his future plans. Zhou Tong responded without hesitation, reminding Ye Qing that he had once told him he was the best support Ye Qing could find. This caught Ye Qing off guard, prompting him to ask when he had ever said such a thing. Zhou Tong, his face filled with determination, declared that his goal was to become the king of supports. Yi Qing couldn't help but reflect on Zhou Tong's stats, with agility at 2 and luck at 1, and marveled at how Zhou Tong still managed to hold his own on the battlefield despite such low numbers. As much as Zhou Tong's spirit impressed him, Yi Qing knew that encouraging him to continue fighting on the front lines would only put him in danger. As Yi Qing mulled over how best to handle Zhou Tong's enthusiasm, Zhou Tong spoke up, his expression bright and cheerful. He painted a picture of Yi Qing charging the front lines while Zhou Tong stayed behind to strengthen him from the rear, insisting that together they would be an unstoppable force. Before Zhou Tong could continue, Yi Qing cut him off, calmly advising against any further expeditions into the abyss. Zhou Tong's smile faded as surprise washed over him. He asked Yi Qing what he meant, clearly taken aback by the unexpected suggestion. Yi Qing glanced at Zhou Tong, whose expression grew troubled after hearing his words. As Yi Qing observed him, he reflected on the reality of Zhou Tong's abilities. While Zhou Tong could strengthen others, his own weakness left him vulnerable and in need of constant protection. In Yi Qing's eyes, this did not align with the image of a true support. Apologizing silently, Yi Qing knew he could not allow Zhou Tong to keep risking his life. Seeking another way to satisfy him, Yi Qing reached into his belongings and handed Zhou Tong a pouch containing 1,000 magic crystals. As he placed the crystals in Zhou Tong's hands, Yi Qing explained that it was everything he had. He assured Zhou Tong that this amount would sustain him for a long time and, with a firm tone, asked him to promise never to set foot in the abyss again. Though disappointment flickered in Zhou Tong's eyes, he nodded in understanding. Despite his reluctance, he acknowledged that Yi Qing's words were spoken out of concern for his well-being and accepted the truth behind them. As Zhou Tong spoke, his expression shifted. Despite Yi Qing's words and the generous gift of magic crystals, Zhou Tong firmly declared that he could not accept living a comfortable life as nothing more than trash. No matter how much wealth he was given, he could not stand the thought of being looked down upon. Even if venturing into the abyss meant risking his life, he was determined to continue. Yi Qing studied Zhou Tong's face, and a faint smile crossed his lips. There was a sincerity in Zhou Tong's expression that was hard to refuse. His resolve was clear, and Yi Qing could see that nothing he said would easily change Zhou Tong's mind. After a brief pause, Yi Qing spoke, asking Zhou Tong how he could hope to protect others if he could not protect himself. Zhou Tong hesitated, unable to find an answer. Without another word, Yi Qing reached into his inventory and retrieved a sword. He reminded Zhou Tong that his microphone only occupied one hand, leaving the other free. Holding the sword out to him, Yi Qing explained that it was Lao Li's sword. He added that, based on what he knew about bards, their role combined both magic and physical abilities. Yi Qing's tone was calm but firm as he handed the weapon over, silently urging Zhou Tong to find strength not just in words, but in action. Yi Qing continued, explaining that Zhou Tong could wield magic weapons to cast the strengthening and weakening spells he excelled at, while also learning to master certain attack spells. He told Zhou Tong that if he had been unable to swing a sword for Lao Li before, now was the time to make the effort. This, Yi Qing added, was a favor Zhou Tong owed to Lao Li. Hearing Yi Qing's words, Zhou Tong placed his hands on the sword. In that moment, he admitted that he did not actually need the magic crystals Yi Qing had given him. Yi Qing smiled at the response and suggested that if Zhou Tong didn't need them, he should give the crystals to the families of Lao Li and Lao Zhu. He reassured Zhou Tong that the two of them would have plenty of opportunities to earn more in the future. With a determined expression, Zhou Tong agreed without hesitation. Moments later, at the entrance to the abyss, 3 unfamiliar figures stood silently, gazing into the darkness beyond. At that moment, a woman spoke to the 2 others standing with her. She explained that after the Blood Red Moon incident, squads of S-rank job changers had been dispatched to eliminate the monsters within the abyss. She went on to say that deep within the abyss, they had found 8 bodies, all identified as members of Blood Oath. Rodrigo, the leader, had succumbed to abyssal corruption and transformed into a monster before being dealt with. Continuing, she mentioned the discovery of additional bodies, one of which had been identified. The man beside her inquired about the identity of the deceased, prompting the woman to reveal that the body belonged to someone frequently accused of being a teen killer during previous abyssal invasions, Chen Xingdian. As she finished speaking, the man took the report and scanned its contents. According to the document, high-quality equipment had been found near the location of Chen's body. The report suggested that Chen had likely encountered the mutated corpse of Rodrigo and died in the ensuing battle. The man read through the reports carefully before speaking. He remarked to the others that while this was an unexpected development, it still fell within the scope of their calculations. He then turned to the woman and asked if this was the only anomaly. She confirmed that Chen was the sole factor. The second man stepped forward, questioning whether their plan had ultimately failed. The seated man dismissed the concern, stating that Rodrigo had been insignificant and had failed to prove his worth. He reassured them that if necessary, they could always find others like Rodrigo to replace him. In the next scene, at Shinfeng People's Hospital, a patient sat outside his room, visibly distressed. Apologizing softly to his child, he whispered that he had no other choice and would have to go through with it once again. In his hand, he held a mysterious key. As he activated the key, dark black matter began to seep out, swirling around him before spreading across the city. Chaos erupted as the black matter consumed the surroundings, sending people into a frenzy of panic. The substance twisted and shattered everything in its path, leaving destruction in its wake as the city descended into disorder. As the people fled in panic, an abyssal gate suddenly materialized in the center of the city. Shock rippled through the crowd as they stared at the ominous portal. Someone shouted for the others to contact the officials immediately, but it was already too late. Monsters began pouring out of the gate, unleashing chaos and destruction. Amid the turmoil, two siblings ran hand in hand, weaving through the streets in desperate escape. The older brother urged his younger sister to keep moving and not to look back, his voice steady despite the fear gripping him. Suddenly, a monster lashed out with a powerful strike, and in that instant, the older brother, Ye Qing, accidentally let go of his sister's hand. Time seemed to slow as the creature charged toward her. Its jaws opened wide, and before Ye Qing could react, the monster engulfed his sister whole. Ye Qing's heart pounded as he reached out, calling her name with a voice filled with anguish. His outstretched hand trembled, desperate to pull her back. But just as he reached for her, Ye Qing jolted awake. His chest heaved with labored breaths as he sat in the darkness of his room. Beads of sweat rolled down his face. Lying back on his bed, Ye Qing stared at the ceiling, waiting for his racing heart to calm. As the weight of the recurring nightmare pressed down on him once more, he whispered to himself, exhausted and worn, he was tired of reliving the same dream over and over again. Ye Qing glanced at his phone and suddenly remembered something he had nearly forgotten. He muttered to himself that he almost missed what he was supposed to do that day. A short time later, Ye Qing found himself in the flower shop. He called out to the florist, Miss Zhang, greeting her with a smile and asking for the usual flowers he always requested. Upon seeing Ye Qing, Zhang asked if he had come to visit his younger sister, little Yi. Ye Qing appeared slightly troubled as he replied that he had an unfortunate incident there. Zhang, hearing this, reassured him, telling Ye Qing that his sister was fortunate to have such a caring brother. Shifting the topic, Zhang then asked Ye Qing if he had gotten a new haircut, complimenting him on how well it suited him. Ye Qing explained that on his way there, he had been stopped by Mr. Military Buff, who mentioned he had learned a new technique for cutting hair. Mr. Military Buff had insisted on trying it on Ye Qing's hair, and despite Ye Qing's initial refusal, he eventually ended up getting the haircut. Changing the subject, Ye Qing mentioned he would help Zhang set out the flowers she always placed outside. Zhang thanked him for the kind offer. A short time later, Zhang mentioned to Ye Qing that she had seen a lot of vehicles heading toward the hospital, many of which appeared to belong to job changers. She asked if something was happening. Hearing this, Ye Qing immediately became worried about what might be occurring near the hospital. Without hesitation, he rushed toward the hospital to investigate. Upon arriving, Ye Qing was shocked to see an abyssal gate standing right in front of him. One of the officials in charge of securing the area ordered the subordinates to set up speed barricades. Ye Qing, still in disbelief, wondered what an abyssal gate was doing in the middle of the city. Approaching one of the officials who was monitoring the situation, Ye Qing was about to ask questions when the official noticed him and quickly spoke. He warned Ye Qing that citizens were to stay back due to the ongoing lockdown in the area. However, as the official finished speaking, a sudden chill ran through his body. He immediately stepped aside, allowing Ye Qing to pass through and enter the abyssal gate without further obstruction. At that moment, another official arrived and asked the first why he had allowed a random person, Ye Qing, to pass. The first official, however, quickly told the second not to ask him anything. He added that Ye Qing, along with the others who had come earlier, were people they should not mess with. Hearing this, the second official became visibly panicked and immediately agreed with the first. Ye Qing, as he entered the abyssal gate, quietly told himself that his little sister should wait for him, as he would not fail this time. With that thought, he stepped into the gate. Upon entering, Ye Qing realized that this was a form of abyssification. The hospital had been transported to another dimension, and the space now seemed far larger than anything the hospital could have contained, much like the shopping mall incident before. As Ye Qing observed his surroundings, he noted that the room had been cleared out, which he assumed was the work of the squad that had been there before him. Ye Qing also saw signs that the squad who had come before him were well equipped. On the ground, he spotted a special bottle, something no ordinary job changers could easily afford, confirming that they had access to resources beyond the norm. At that moment, Ye Qing activated his skill on the bottle and instructed it to bring back the effective magic contents. Instantly, the contents that had been emptied reappeared, and the system informed Ye Qing that the bottle was an effective magic bottle, capable of restoring 85% of magic power, removing fatigue, and having consumption for the next 30 seconds. Ye Qing then thought to himself that even if he were to take on the abyss alone and search for little Zhou and his sister, the magic consumption would be intense. He reminded himself to be well prepared. A short time later, Ye Qing activated his scouting vision skill, which allowed him to see much more clearly in the dark. As he moved forward, he came across a particular area where the system gave him a hint. It told him that there were two paths ahead, both leading to a point of no return. Ye Qing understood that he would have to choose a one-way path. Ye Qing then observed the marks on the floor in that area and realized that the previous squad had left them behind. The marks appeared to be recent, so Ye Qing assumed that the squad had entered the labyrinth for a rescue mission. Deciding to increase the chances of rescuing his sister, Ye Qing resolved to take the opposite path of the one the first squad had chosen. Ye Qing told himself that he wasn't sure how much time he would spend inside the labyrinth. He added that the worst-case scenario was having to search the entire place alone. While he wasn't happy with the situation, he knew there was no time to waste. An average person wouldn't survive long in an abyss like this, so he needed to hurry and find his sister before anything bad happened. Ye Qing started running down the uncharted path, noticing a brand new red carpet on the floor, confirming that this area had not been explored yet. As he ran, he realized that the path behind him had been consumed by darkness, forming a barrier that prevented him from turning back. Summoning a prop, Ye Qing reminded himself that he had seen its capabilities before. If someone were trapped in a maze, they could mark the area on a map. Holding the prop, known as the Eye of Argos, Ye Qing commanded the system to open the map of the area. The system, however, responded to Ye Qing's command by telling him that it was unable to show the map outside of this area. Ye Qing, upon hearing that, realized that it was no surprise others used blades to carve marks instead. In the Abyss Maze, the system's directional guidance was completely ineffective, leading Ye Qing to conclude that this was likely the so-called Abyss of Rule. As he continued forward, Ye Qing found himself face to face with an unknown creature. He became alert, wondering if he had stumbled into a trap room. However, he dismissed the thought, as he hadn't heard any mechanisms in motion. As he examined the surroundings, he grew confused by the eerie silence in the room, which seemed abnormal. Just as he was pondering this, a monster appeared from behind and launched a surprise attack. Fortunately, Ye Qing's quick reflexes allowed him to dodge the monster's strike before it could land. Stepping back a little further to avoid the attack, Ye Qing immediately countered, launching a strike of his own. His blade cut through the monster's body, splitting it in half. However, the system then announced that Ye Qing's attack had been ineffective. To his surprise, the monster's body began reattaching itself. Ye Qing, witnessing the monster's ability to regenerate, immediately realized that it had physical immunity. However, as he was processing this, the monster let out a deafening roar that caused Ye Qing's ears to bleed. Despite his efforts to cover his ears, the roar was too powerful and overwhelming. In that moment, Ye Qing realized that he could no longer rely on his hearing, and his perception would be significantly reduced. He thought to himself that he had underestimated the dangers of the abyss and concluded that he was facing a monster of rule. As Ye Qing reflected on this, memories from 3 years ago resurfaced. He remembered encountering a similar monster back then. During that time, he had been on the ground, panicked, staring at what seemed to be the figures of monsters. However, there was no light, so he couldn't see clearly. Upon closer inspection, he realized that the figures were just statues. Relieved, Ye Qing realized that he hadn't been facing real monsters after all, but statues he had mistaken for threats. As Ye Qing continued his work, picking up magic crystals, he reminded himself not to waste even a single one. However, as he focused on his task, the supposed statues suddenly began to move. Ye Qing, noticing this, felt a surge of fear and questioned whether his initial assumption about the statues was wrong. He had thought they were simply piles of stones, but it seemed they were much more than that. Just as he was about to turn and flee, one of the scavengers rushed over, urgently telling Ye Qing not to look away from the monsters. The scavenger instructed him to keep his eyes on the statues and not blink, explaining that these creatures were known as weeping stone statues. Ye Qing, perplexed, wondered what a weeping stone statue was, and the mere mention of the name sent a chill down his spine. The scavenger repeated the warning, emphasizing that Ye Qing must only focus on the statues and not look anywhere else. The man then explained to Ye Qing that the monsters in the abyss followed certain rules and logic, and the higher the level of a monster, the more complex its logic. He added that the weeping stone statues in front of Ye Qing were S-class creatures, which typically didn't attack job changers. However, he warned that the rule with these creatures was that if a person were to look away from them, their body would be petrified and transformed into a statue, with the monsters locking onto that person. If the person shifted their gaze, the statues would rush toward them at a speed capable of killing most job changers instantly. Ye Qing, understanding the gravity of the situation, asked the man what they should do next. The man advised Ye Qing to follow his lead and slowly back away without blinking until they were out of the room. Ye Qing agreed and they began to move cautiously. However, as they were backing away, Ye Qing suddenly stumbled over a few rocks in his path and fell, breaking his gaze from the monsters. The moment his gaze shifted, the monsters immediately charged at them. But before they could reach the two of them, the man reacted swiftly, closing the door to the room just in time, trapping the monsters inside and preventing them from advancing. Ye Qing sat on the ground, still in shock from the situation that had just unfolded. After a few moments, he let out a deep breath. At that moment, the man spoke, telling Ye Qing that he had been lucky this time. He explained that if Ye Qing had tried to attack the weeping stone statues like other job changers, not only would he have caused no damage, but he would have been instantly killed. As the man said this, he gave Ye Qing a smile and added that, although the two of them were just scavengers with little fighting ability, their experience was not any less than that of other job changers. Back in the present, Ye Qing, remembering the encounter, had a shift in expression. He quickly activated his fire magic, Great Flame Explosion, and charged toward the monster. As he moved, Ye Qing thought to himself that if the monster had physical immunity, perhaps magic would be its weakness. With that in mind, he began to charge up his attack. However, just as he was about to release it, Ye Qing suddenly lost control of his magic. Realizing this, he felt a surge of frustration, knowing that his fire control had failed him when he needed it most. It was a shame, he thought, that fire magic was the only attack he had fully mastered, yet in this crucial moment, he couldn't control it properly. As the monster relentlessly attacked Ye Qing, he skillfully dodged its strikes while thinking to himself. He realized that the whereabouts of the boat were still unknown,
That's all
and there
for
was no
today.
way he
Thanks
could
for
remain in the
watching.
first room without making progress. Ye Qing also noted that while the monster had physical immunity, its attacks were primarily physical, making this combination of rules seem strange to him. Amidst these thoughts, Ye Qing came to a conclusion: he would be able to successfully fend off the monster. Ye Qing, while dodging the monster, realized he had finally understood the labyrinth's rules and mechanisms. He noted that the demon spirit would only materialize when an attack was executed. As he evaded the strike, he observed that the scythe had not yet been withdrawn. This meant the monster had not only lost the protection of the rules that rendered physical attacks ineffective, but now such attacks had become its weakness. Recognizing this, Ye Qing unleashed a flurry of strikes, annihilating the monster instantly. As the creature began to slowly vanish, Ye Qing watched intently. Suddenly, a surge of magic power emerged, drawing in the monster's essence. In that moment, the monster reappeared, stronger than before. Seeing this, Ye Qing realized the battle was far from over. The monster had entered the second stage of its transformation. Anticipating the challenge ahead, Ye Qing thought to himself that the fight was about to become far more difficult, but also more intriguing. The monster unleashed a surge of power, enveloping Ye Qing with its overwhelming force. Ye Qing was startled by the intensity of the monster's strength. As the creature's deafening scream disrupted his hearing, Ye Qing's vision also began to falter. Realizing his senses were compromised, he considered deactivating the blood clone in advance to ensure he could save himself if the situation worsened. However, just as he was about to act, he remembered that the skill had been used moments ago and required at least a 30-second cooldown. His remaining magic power was insufficient to sustain continuous summons. While Ye Qing was still processing this, the monster launched a powerful attack. He managed to block it at the last moment, but the sheer force of the strike sent him hurtling backward. As he regained his footing, Ye Qing acknowledged that he had no time to properly react to the monster's relentless assault. He recognized that he had narrowly avoided fatal blows by sheer luck. The realization struck him: he was facing an assassin whose strength could not be overcome by his stacked attributes alone. Ye Qing activated another skill, man-eating plant regeneration. As soon as the skill took effect, the system notified him that all his wounds had been healed. With his body restored, Ye Qing recognized the need to boost his health further, ensuring he could survive the monster's powerful attacks without being killed in a single blow. The monster, witnessing this, began to show signs of unease. It sensed that Ye Qing was growing stronger, but there was also a deeper fear lingering within the creature, something beyond Ye Qing himself. Ye Qing observed the demon spirit in its second form and noted that it seemed afraid of luminous things. Even the faint glow of healing magic made the monster hesitant to approach him. Realizing this, a menacing grin crossed Ye Qing's face as he devised a strategy to exploit the creature's weakness. He activated his fire attribute, unleashing a surge of energy that engulfed his entire body in bright, blazing flames. With flames erupting around him, Ye Qing felt a surge of confidence. He knew the battle had shifted in his favor. Charging forward, he advanced towards the monster, his body radiating intense light and heat. The monster, paralyzed by fear of Ye Qing's brilliant aura, instinctively began to retreat. As Ye Qing closed the distance, the monster turned and fled, overwhelmed by the luminous force now pursuing it. As Ye Qing chased the monster, he reflected on why the demon spirit feared flames. Fire was its life force, and in its previous existence, it had been an innocent soul that perished in a blaze. However, Ye Qing also realized that fire element skills were cursed, rendering them unusable. Acknowledging this limitation, he concluded that if he could not hurl fire at the monster, there was only one solution: he would become the fireball himself. Activating his skill, Spirit Dash, Ye Qing surged forward, his speed increasing rapidly. As he closed the distance between himself and the monster, he unleashed Great Flame Explosion. The moment his attack connected, both he and the monster were engulfed in a powerful blast. The force of the explosion sent Ye Qing flying backward. Though he suffered significant damage, he quickly regained his footing. The monster, however, writhed in agony as the flames consumed it. Within moments, the fire reduced the creature to ashes. As the last embers faded, the system notified Ye Qing that the demon spirit had been defeated. The system notified Ye Qing that his remaining health was only 1 out of 10. It also reported that his arm was severely burned, preventing him from wielding weapons or casting spells for the time being. Upon reading the message, Ye Qing chuckled softly to himself, acknowledging that the price of victory had been steep. He decided to wait for the cooldown of his regeneration ability to end, allowing him to heal once more. Shifting his attention, Ye Qing refocused on the monster, which was still smoldering from the flames. A flicker of concern crossed his mind as he realized the creature might burn to ashes before he could salvage it. Acting quickly, Ye Qing urged the monster to endure and immediately activated his recycling ability. Within moments, the remnants of the monster were absorbed, and Ye Qing obtained an artifact known as Soul Reaper. The system then informed him of the artifact's abilities. By using Soul Reaper, Ye Qing could summon the demon spirit to charge forward and unleash a large-scale scythe attack, dealing 5 times his base damage. If any target perished from this skill, Despair Harvest would activate, restoring 5% of his health and mana. Should Despair Harvest trigger more than 5 times in a single use, Ye Qing would enter an incorporeal state for 1 second. In this state, he would become immune to physical attacks and obstacles. The system further informed Ye Qing that if the artifact's attack failed to kill its target, he would suffer backlash equal to the damage dealt. It also clarified that artifacts could not be equipped, as they were bound to the user's soul and could not be traded. Upon receiving this information, Ye Qing reflected on the uniqueness of the artifact. He recognized that the cards he had obtained this time were unlike anything he had encountered before. This was the first time he had seen a soul-bound artifact card. Ye Qing analyzed the potential of the Soul Harvesting Blade, noting that it could convert slain targets into health and mana. If summoned within a large group of enemies, it had the potential to annihilate them in a single strike. However, the cost of using the artifact was steep. If the attack failed to kill its target, the resulting backlash could severely injure or even kill him. Ye Qing understood the importance of precise timing when wielding the artifact. A single mistake could lead to disastrous consequences. As he mulled over this, he noticed that the sealed door ahead had now opened. At that moment, the system alerted him that the regeneration cooldown had ended. Without hesitation, Ye Qing activated his regeneration ability, allowing his wounds to heal. With renewed determination, he called out to his younger sister, Xiao Zhou, assuring her that he was on his way to rescue her. In another part of the labyrinth, a monstrous creature wielding a massive cleaver was methodically hacking the bodies of fallen humans into pieces. Hidden behind a corner, Xiao Zhou pressed herself against the cold stone wall, desperately trying to stay out of sight. Spotting an empty bottle nearby, she seized it and hurled it toward the opposite direction, hoping to divert the monster's attention. The creature's ears twitched at the sound of the bottle clattering across the floor. Its gaze shifted, and with heavy footsteps, it lumbered toward the source of the noise. Taking advantage of the distraction, Xiao Zhou quietly slipped away, sprinting through the dimly lit corridor in search of safety. As she fled, her foot caught on debris scattered across the ground, sending her tumbling forward. Wincing, she quickly pushed herself up, but her eyes locked onto a familiar sight just beyond her reach. Her cherished teddy bear, worn yet beloved, lay sprawled on the cold floor. Without hesitation, she crawled toward it, determined to retrieve the small token of comfort. Clutching the bear to her chest, Xiao Zhou whispered a silent promise to protect her brother, Ye Qing, vowing that she would never allow him to suffer again. But before she could rise, the ground trembled beneath her. Looking up, she saw the monster's massive foot slam down, crushing the teddy bear beneath it. Xiao Zhou's heart sank as the creature fixed its glowing eyes on her, releasing a deafening roar that echoed through the corridor. The monster began to advance toward Xiao Zhou, its heavy footsteps echoing through the corridor. With each step, dread tightened around her as she realized the severity of her situation. Panic creeping in, she called out desperately for her brother, pleading for him to save her from the looming threat. As her voice echoed, the monster lunged forward, launching a powerful strike aimed directly at her. Just as the attack was about to land, a massive sword cleaved through the air, slicing the monster cleanly in half. The creature crumbled to the ground, lifeless. Xiao Zhou stared in shock at the scene before her, barely comprehending what had happened. A man stood calmly over the fallen monster, his swords glinting faintly in the dim light. His name was Wu Ming, a dual swordsman whose expression remained impassive as his gaze shifted to Xiao Zhou, still trembling on the floor. Relief washed over her when she recognized him as a hunter. Just as she began to breathe easier, Wu Ming turned without a word and started walking away, showing no intention of helping further. Realizing he was leaving her behind, panic seized Xiao Zhou once again. Scrambling to her feet, she rushed after him, clutching his leg and begging him not to abandon her, pleading for him to take her along. Wu Ming glanced down at Xiao Zhou and calmly informed her that there were no more monsters in the immediate area. He told her she could hide in the corner until the rescue teams arrived. Wu Ming added that if she insisted on following him, she would only put herself in greater danger, as he was heading deeper into monster territory. Despite his warning, Xiao Zhou met his gaze with unwavering determination. She told him she had to survive, at least long enough to see her brother, Ye Qing, again. She explained that she had made a promise to her brother and intended to keep it no matter what. 7 years earlier, Ye Qing sat in a hospital room, listening intently to the doctor. The doctor explained that Xiao Zhou's spinal nerves had been severely damaged. He went on to say that she would likely never walk again, and the fact that she could still move her upper body was nothing short of miraculous. Ye Qing was stunned by the news, unable to fully process the reality that his little sister might never stand on her own again. The doctor continued, explaining to Ye Qing that severe spinal nerve damage was considered theoretically irreversible. However, he added that this was only in theory. Upon hearing those words, a glimmer of hope sparked within Ye Qing. He immediately asked if the doctor meant there was still a chance for Xiao Zhou to recover. With urgency, Ye Qing pressed further, asking what steps he could take and what he needed to do to help his sister. The doctor explained that while traditional scientific methods offered no solution, there were accounts of extraordinary recoveries beyond the realm of science. He mentioned cases where blind patients had regained their sight after venturing into the abyss. In the recently discovered abyssal worlds, mysterious forces existed, forces capable of treating ailments that modern medicine could not cure. The doctor suggested that certain medicines or equipment, imbued with this inexplicable power, might hold the key to Xiao Zhou's recovery. He went on to say that if Xiao Zhou's condition had been caused by an encounter with a monster from the abyss, the cure might also lie within the abyss itself. Ye Qing was astonished by the possibility that his sister's path to healing could be hidden in such a dangerous and unknown place. Determined, Ye Qing resolved that if he could one day gain the ability to enter the abyss, he might find the means to save his sister. Upon hearing Ye Qing's words, the doctor explained that only job changers had the ability to enter the abyss. He added that for someone without a level, like Ye Qing, attempting to step into the abyss would be tantamount to suicide. Instead of dwelling on that possibility, the doctor advised Ye Qing to focus on the more immediate issue at hand. He pointed out that the cost of routine treatment in the hospital was significant, with daily expenses amounting to at least 8,000 yuan. Ye Qing, hearing this, lowered his head in acknowledgement and told the doctor that he would do everything in his power to raise the money for his sister's treatment. He requested that the doctor continue to care for Xiao Zhou in the meantime. The doctor agreed, assuring Ye Qing that he would do everything he could to help. However, he also reminded Ye Qing that it was crucial to pay the hospital bills on time. Ye Qing nodded in understanding, assuring the doctor that he would come up with the full amount as soon as possible. With that, Ye Qing turned and walked away, determined to find a way to support his sister's treatment. As Ye Qing made his way to the room where his sister was, the nurses in the hallway observed him quietly. They whispered among themselves, recalling that both of Ye Qing's parents had died during the rampage of the abyssal monster. They also noted that Xiao Zhou had been left disabled due to the incident, leaving Ye Qing as the sole person responsible for taking care of his sister despite his young age. The nurses felt a deep sympathy for him and the hardships he faced. Ye Qing overheard their conversation but showed no sadness. Instead, he smiled brightly, unfazed by their pity. When he reached the door to his sister's room, he opened it with a beaming smile and greeted Xiao Zhou, saying that her big brother Ye Qing was here. Xiao Zhou, seeing him, asked where he had been. Ye Qing explained that he had gone to consult the doctor. Changing the subject, he told her he was planning to go to a place called the Abyss. Xiao Zhou, confused, asked if the Abyss was a safe place. Ye Qing, still smiling brightly, reassured her that the Abyss was indeed a safe place and that it wasn't dangerous at all. He explained that all he needed to do was follow the other people who would be going there with him. In that moment, Ye Qing stood up and told Xiao Zhou that he had something for her. He then took out a teddy bear and presented it to his little sister, explaining that he wouldn't be able to be with her all the time for a while. He told her that whenever he wasn't around, the teddy bear would be there to protect her on his behalf. Upon hearing this, Xiao Zhou became worried and expressed her concern. She told Ye Qing that he was the only family she had left and that she didn't want to see him in danger again. She pleaded with him not to go anywhere near monsters. Although troubled by her words, Ye Qing knew that he wouldn't be able to keep the promise of avoiding dangerous places. However, he felt he had no choice but to lie. So, he reassured Xiao Zhou, telling her that he wouldn't go anywhere where monsters were. He also added that he had found a high-paying job, one that would earn enough money to help with her treatment and get her legs healed. Ye Qing smiled softly and told Xiao Zhou that if she waited just a little longer, she would be able to stand on her own 2 feet again. Xiao Zhou then told Ye Qing that if her brother had to rely on dangerous methods to make money, she would rather remain in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. She raised her pinky finger and told Ye Qing that he must promise her never to enter a place full of monsters. The two of them locked their pinky fingers together, and Ye Qing promised his little sister that he would not put himself in danger. That was their promise. Back in the present, Xiao Zhou told Wu Ming, who was standing in front of her, that if she stayed in the Abyss, her big brother Ye Qing would surely find a way to enter. She didn't want him to risk his life for her again. Xiao Zhou made it clear that she was not willing to die in the Abyss for Ye Qing's sake, and at the same time, she refused to let her big brother die either. Wu Ming, hearing this, was intrigued by Xiao Zhou's determination to protect her life. He picked her up from the floor and told her that if a monster were to come and harm her, he would do nothing at all. Wu Ming then placed Xiao Zhou back in her wheelchair, and as she settled in, she felt relieved that the wheelchair was still intact, allowing her to move around. Wu Ming then told Xiao Zhou that she was not his commissioner and that he didn't care if she lived or died. Xiao Zhou, however, reassured him that he didn't need to worry about her. She told him to continue with his own business while she followed him from a distance, making sure not to get in his way. Wu Ming, upon hearing this, introduced himself to Xiao Zhou, stating his name and that he was a dual swordsman. Meanwhile, Ye Qing was roaming through the area, reflecting on his experiences as a scavenger. He recalled having seen many potions that could heal physical injuries. However, these potions could only heal injuries caused by creatures of the Abyss, with a few exceptions. One of the rules of the Abyss was that one could not heal beyond the state in which they entered. If the injuries, such as burns, were inflicted before entering the Abyss, they could not be healed beyond the extent of those original injuries. Ye Qing thought to himself that if it weren't for this rule, he would have already found a cure for Xiao Zhou long ago. As Ye Qing was walking, he stumbled upon something that caught his attention. To his surprise, it was the corpses of several men, slain by the monsters in the area. It seemed that a brutal battle had taken place, and he noted that the monsters here were likely at a higher level than the job changers, which made it understandable that all the job changers had been wiped out. Ye Qing then looked around and noticed there were no signs of any remaining monsters. He thought it was possible that there was a survivor who had managed to escape the chaos. As he continued searching, Ye Qing was taken aback by what he saw in front of him, a gigantic monster's corpse, sliced cleanly down the middle, ending its life. Using his observing eye, Ye Qing tried to analyze the situation, but he soon realized that his skill couldn't detect any traces of magic. As he scanned the bodies of the job changers, he observed that most of the casualties were from agility and intelligence-based classes. This led Ye Qing to wonder if the job changer who had defeated the massive monster had relied solely on brute force. Ye Qing smiled at the thought that there was someone out there stronger than all the other job changers. He told himself that the person who had defeated the monster in front of him was likely a bone-crushing level existence. Meanwhile, Xiao Zhou quietly followed Wu Ming, keeping her distance. As they moved forward, Wu Ming accidentally stepped on a trap, triggering it. In that instant, multiple arrows shot toward him, piercing his body. Xiao Zhou, worried about what had just happened, looked on with concern. However, Wu Ming remained calm, and from his behavior, it seemed as though he hadn't been injured at all. Worried, Xiao Zhou asked Wu Ming if he was going to be fine and if they could continue moving forward despite his injuries. Wu Ming, however, was confused by her question. He recalled a memory from 4 years ago, when he had been in an A-class Abyss-rank ancient tomb. The boss of the Abyss stood before the hunters, and the monster's name was King. At that moment, the boss monster grabbed one of the hunters and ended their life right in front of the others. Wu Ming appeared troubled by the situation he and his team were facing, as the boss monster was incredibly powerful. At that moment, an old man, who seemed to be a scientist, was shouting at the hunters around him. The old man scolded them, calling them all foolish for standing around and acting like cowards. He reminded them that they were mercenaries and hunters, hired to fight, and that they should take the money and charge forward aggressively. The old man emphasized that they were all lives he had bought with double the usual payment. Wu Ming, thinking to himself, reflected on his own situation. He realized that, because of his criminal past and lack of legal status, he could only join a private hunting group as a mercenary. Among this group of reckless individuals, there were a few who were completely indifferent to life and death. They took on near-suicidal missions and demanded double the pay for such dangerous work. The old man, now furious, shouted at the mercenaries and hunters, offering a reward of 100,000 credit points to anyone who could kill the boss of the Abyss. He insisted that they could not afford to miss out on the final treasure that lay within the Abyss. But then, as if changing his mind, the old man raised the stakes, offering 200,000 credit points to the person who would defeat the boss monster. The mercenaries, upon hearing the reward offered, brightened with excitement at the prospect of such a large sum. Wu Ming, thinking to himself, realized that he was just like a swordsman willing to risk everything for money, much like a gambler constantly doubling bets at a casino, a dangerous game that could make one's head spin. The rest of the mercenaries then voiced their demand for a higher payout, suggesting 250,000. The old man, though reluctant, had no choice but to agree. As soon as he did, all the mercenaries readied themselves for the battle against the monster. The fight began, and the mercenaries swiftly engaged the minions of the boss monster. Gradually, they managed to reduce the number of minions. However, when they turned their focus to the boss monster itself, the battle proved to be far more challenging. Despite their efforts, the boss monster remained incredibly powerful and started rampaging through the mercenaries, annihilating them one by one. In the midst of the chaos, the boss monster shifted its attention to the old man. Realizing the danger, the old man quickly shouted to the mercenaries, urging them to keep him safe. He reminded them that they would only be paid if he managed to survive and escape the Abyss, and emphasized that he had bought their lives, making it their duty to protect him from harm. Wu Ming, although visibly annoyed by the old man's words, had no choice but to follow his directive. He charged towards the boss monster, gathering all his strength and delivering a powerful strike that not only dealt significant damage but also ended the monster's life. As the boss monster fell, an artifact emerged from its body, and a treasure chest appeared on the ground. Without hesitation, the old man pushed Wu Ming aside and instructed him to get out of his way, eager to inspect the contents of the treasure chest. Bruised and battered, Wu Ming asked the old man if his pay would be doubled now that he had defeated the boss monster. The old man, laughing menacingly, responded that Wu Ming was practically a dead man given the extent of his injuries. He told Wu Ming that he wouldn't need any money, as he would be dead soon enough. The old man then added that he was going to become rich and that he hadn't wasted his money acquiring information about the hidden abyss for nothing. As the old man spoke, he opened the treasure chest, only to be shocked to find it empty. He immediately began cursing, having invested so much effort and money to reach this point in the abyss. As he vented his frustration, something strange began to happen to his body. Suddenly, he exploded in a burst of sand. Wu Ming, observing this, immediately realized that the treasure chest had been cursed and that it was responsible for the old man's explosion. His initial worry was that he too would be cursed, but as he thought about it, his attention was drawn to the artifact floating in the air. It was none other than the Corpse King's jewel. The artifact's potential depended on the user. Wu Ming reached out and grabbed the artifact. At that moment, the system informed him that the artifact was an immortal relic and a soul-binding artifact, capable of turning its bearer into an undead creature. The system also notified him that sacred and healing spells would cause fatal damage to him, while ordinary damage would not be able to kill him as an undead. Wu Ming, realizing that the cost of his transformation was the loss of the ability to feel pain and emotional changes, understood that he had become someone who could not die. Back in the present, Xiao Zhou was taken aback as she noticed that Wu Ming had not been affected by any of the traps that had hit him. On top of that, she saw that his blood was made of sand. Curious, she asked him what kind of curse he had been afflicted with. Wu Ming, hearing her question, turned away and completely ignored her, walking off without a word. Xiao Zhou, feeling irritated by his behavior, asked him why he was ignoring her. In a distant location, an intense battle raged between Ye Qing and hundreds of monsters from the abyss. As the two sides clashed, Ye Qing was seen methodically annihilating the monsters that charged toward him. Although he managed to hold his ground, he was clearly struggling, his face etched with concern. Ye Qing reflected that in his haste, he had failed to allocate his points carefully, forcing him to evenly distribute his accumulated free points. As a result, almost all of his stats exceeded 200 points, but this approach left him vulnerable. Entering each new room without prior knowledge of the monsters within meant that any misjudgment of his own capabilities could prove fatal. Despite the individual monsters in the abyss not being particularly strong, the relentless battles were exhausting, gradually wearing Ye Qing down. As he continued to fight, the system alerted him mid-battle that his mana had dropped below 5%. Realizing this, Ye Qing knew he was in serious trouble. His depleted magic meant he could no longer use any skills, leaving him at a critical disadvantage. At that moment, one of the monsters charged toward Ye Qing. Realizing that he could no longer rely on his skills due to his depleted mana, Ye Qing concluded there was only one option left. He clenched his fists, deciding to rely solely on his raw stats to continue the fight. With this resolve, Ye Qing launched into another rampage, demolishing the monsters with sheer physical prowess. After a few moments of relentless combat, the remaining monsters began to retreat, realizing they stood no chance against him. As Ye Qing watched the creatures flee, he recognized that this battle felt endless. After enduring 4 consecutive monster rooms, his body was growing fatigued, and his maximum mana had dropped to only half of its full capacity. The lightweight mana potions in his backpack were completely depleted, leaving only the large bottles he had picked up at the beginning of the abyss. However, Ye Qing resolved to save these remaining potions for critical moments. With this thought in mind, Ye Qing quickened his pace, chasing down the retreating monsters. When he caught up to them, he unleashed powerful strikes, annihilating each one and eliminating them from the abyss. Despite this victory, countless other monsters remained alive. Faced with their overwhelming numbers, Ye Qing determined that he had no choice but to use the skill he had acquired recently. In that moment, Ye Qing activated his artifact, the Soul Reaper. As the scythe emerged from the artifact, Ye Qing reflected on its massive side effects, which made him reluctant to use it recklessly. However, he reasoned that if he targeted monsters already on the brink of death, the artifact's skill, Despair Reap, might activate and restore his health. Weighing the risks, Ye Qing decided to take a gamble, hoping his theory about the artifact's effects would prove correct. He sent the Soul Reaper forward, commanding it to annihilate all the monsters in the vicinity. As the artifact unleashed its devastating power and eradicated every monster, the system promptly informed Ye Qing that the Despair Reap skill had been triggered. As a result, all of Ye Qing's health and mana were fully restored. Relieved, Ye Qing breathed deeply, grateful that his prediction had been accurate. This strategic use of the artifact not only saved his remaining mana potions but also reduced his reliance on super regeneration. However, the system added a warning, noting that the cooldown time for the artifact's skill would increase with repeated use. As Ye Qing contemplated his next move, he suddenly heard a faint sound nearby. Curious about its source, he stepped forward but accidentally crushed a pair of glasses underfoot. Puzzled, Ye Qing wondered who the glasses might belong to. Moments later, he sensed the presence of someone hiding inside a barrel nearby. Approaching the barrel, Ye Qing demanded to know who was hiding there. When no response came, he prepared to attack, suspecting it might be a threat. Just as Ye Qing was about to strike, a voice called out, pleading with him to stop, explaining that the person inside was human. The individual then emerged from the barrel, nervously asking if Ye Qing had seen their glasses. Ye Qing handed over the broken glasses he had stepped on earlier. The person had just the shattered frames on their face and introduced themselves as Song Qing Shan, a doctor and researcher. Song explained that he was unsure of what had happened, but the hospital ward had suddenly been overrun by monsters like the ones Ye Qing had just defeated. Terrified, Song had fled to an unfamiliar room and, in desperation, hidden inside the barrel to avoid detection by the creatures. Hearing this, Ye Qing asked if Song had encountered any other survivors. Song replied grimly, explaining that there was little chance of anyone else surviving. The hospital was now part of the abyss, and even a healthy individual would struggle to endure in such a place, let alone patients who were already disabled or gravely injured. Upon hearing Song's words, Ye Qing's anger flared. He grabbed Song by the collar and demanded an explanation, questioning what he meant by referring to patients as disabled with missing limbs. Ye Qing added that it was strange and insensitive for a doctor to speak that way. Panicking, Song stammered that his statement was not strange at all, emphasizing that he was a professional and fully aware of his limitations. He explained that, as a doctor, he lacked the ability to fight monsters and had to prioritize his own safety above all else. Song argued that even if he wanted to rescue the patients, his survival instinct took precedence in such dire circumstances. If he had strong combat skills, he said, he wouldn't have been hiding in a barrel in the first place. Shifting the conversation, Song asked Ye Qing if he was there specifically to rescue him. His demeanor suddenly changed, and with a calculating expression, he told Ye Qing to stop with the unnecessary accusations if he had been commissioned to save him. Song speculated that the Lionheart group must have promised Ye Qing a staggering reward for his rescue. He then urged Ye Qing to focus on getting him out of the abyss safely, assuring him that the reward would belong entirely to Ye Qing. Ye Qing was momentarily surprised when Song mentioned the Lionheart group. His thoughts drifted back to the past, recalling the moment when he had defeated Rodrigo. After that victory, the system had informed Ye Qing that he had earned 150 free attribute points. At the time, Ye Qing had approached Zhou Tong and presented him with an emblem he had found. Zhou Tong, upon seeing the emblem, explained that it belonged to the Lionheart Hunter group, a prestigious and powerful organization that only accepted the strongest members. Returning to the present, Ye Qing, after hearing Song's remarks, turned and began walking in the opposite direction of the exit. Alarmed, Song shouted after him, pointing out that Ye Qing was heading away from the exit. Ye Qing paused and asked Song if he had come from the ward area. When Song confirmed this, he also added dismissively that Ye Qing should not bother saving the patients there. Song claimed they were all cripples from poor families and wouldn't have any money to reward Ye Qing for his efforts. Ye Qing responded calmly, apologizing to Song before explaining his true purpose. He told Song that he was in the abyss to save his sister, who was one of the patients in the ward. When Song heard that Ye Qing was only there to save his sister and not him, he grew panicked. He asked Ye Qing again if he was truly there just for his sister and not a member of the Lionheart group. Ye Qing confirmed this, stating that Song was correct and that he was nothing more than a scavenger who collected garbage, not saved it. With a sharp tone, Ye Qing addressed Song, making it clear he had no interest in saving what he considered trash like Song. Without further hesitation, Ye Qing proceeded toward the gate in front of him. Seeing this, Song quickly ran to catch up, following Ye Qing from behind. Trying to salvage the situation, Song referred to Ye Qing as his master and explained that the area they were in had transformed into a labyrinth. He added that if Ye Qing ventured into the direction Song had come from, he would inevitably encounter branching paths and risk getting lost. Song proposed that he guide Ye Qing to the ward, suggesting that they travel together. He assured Ye Qing that this would allow them to find his sister more efficiently while also giving Song a chance to escape the labyrinth safely. Song emphasized that their cooperation could benefit them both, with him acting as the guide and Ye Qing providing protection. Ye Qing, however, remained silent in response to Song's suggestion and continued moving forward without acknowledging him. Seeing that Ye Qing had no intention of answering, Song decided to interpret his silence as agreement. He told Ye Qing he would take the lead and instructed him to follow through the teleportation gate. Both of them stepped through the gate together. As they emerged on the other side, Song broke the silence by asking Ye Qing which group he belonged to. Ye Qing calmly replied that he had entered the labyrinth on his own and was not affiliated with any group. Song was taken aback, surprised to learn that Ye Qing was a solo independent hunter. He remarked that in times like these, it was rare to find hunters who still chose to walk alone. He added that any skilled individual was usually recruited by one of the top organizations, such as Tartarus, Lionheart Hunt, or the Cloud Top Guilds. Song explained that these elite groups offered professional hunters lucrative salaries to secure their talents, relying on them to tackle the most dangerous and deepest labyrinths on behalf of the guilds. Song, attempting to sound helpful, suggested to Ye Qing that once they escaped the labyrinth, he could introduce Ye Qing to a few reputable guilds as a gesture of gratitude for helping him. However, Ye Qing was becoming increasingly irritated by Song's non-stop chatter. Finally, Ye Qing raised his voice, commanding Song to listen. He firmly told Song that his sister's name was Ye Xiaozhou and instructed him to stay quiet and focus solely on leading the way to her, rather than wasting time talking. The mention of Ye Xiaozhou's name caused Song to freeze in terror, his expression turning pale. Panic began to set in as memories from his past resurfaced. Song recalled a time when he had been tasked with conducting experiments on 2 test subjects as part of a secret scientific project. One of those test subjects was none other than Xiaozhou, Ye Qing's sister. In that moment, Song remembered nervously asking one of the men in black suits about the condition of the 2 test subjects, as he had heard that both were minors. The memory of those events haunted him, and now, faced with Ye Qing's revelation, the weight of his actions bore down on him heavily. The man assured Song that there was no need for concern, explaining that the families of the 2 children would not be able to cause any trouble. He informed Song that one of the children was named Ye Xiaozhou, who lived with her older brother. The man added that the brother was a clairvoyant who struggled in the depths of the labyrinths just to cover his sister's medical bills. He noted that it was only a matter of time before the brother perished in the labyrinth due to his weakness. The man continued, saying that the other child was named Lin Shugu. Her father had recently been released from prison, had no job, and survived by borrowing money from anyone he could. Song, upon hearing this, expressed relief, acknowledging that both test subjects lacked any significant social connections or influence. He then asked the man how he had managed to convince the 2 children to agree to be used as test subjects. The man replied that no real persuasion had been necessary. All he had done was tell the children that they were a burden to their families. That simple statement was enough to make them willingly accept their roles as test subjects. The man then elaborated on his approach with the first test subject, Lin Shugu. He explained to her that her father was unemployed and struggling to provide for her, especially when it came to affording her medical treatment. The man told Lin, although it was difficult to say, that her father had not been visiting her as often lately, and with each passing day, his visits grew more infrequent. He suggested to Lin that perhaps her father had begun to see her as a burden. For the second test subject, Ye Xiaozhou, the man approached her by telling her that her brother was risking his life every day to pay for her treatment. He asked Xiao Zhou if she wanted her brother to remain safe at all times. Xiao Zhou, upon hearing this, expressed her desire for her brother to be safe. The man then offered the two children a potential solution. He told them that if he could offer a new treatment that could cure their disabilities and prevent them from becoming burdens on society, would they be willing to participate in the experiment? Both Lin and Xiao Zhou, upon hearing the man's proposition, became excited. They immediately expressed their willingness to participate. Lin eagerly volunteered to be the first test subject, while Xiao Zhou also expressed her desire to join. She told the man that she wanted to stand on her own 2 feet and no longer be a burden to her brother. The man, upon hearing their responses, gave a menacing smile and praised the two for being good children. He then handed them an agreement paper and told them that all they needed to do was sign it. Moments later, they found themselves in the lab, where Lin was submerged in a water cylinder. The man in the black suit stood beside Song, both of them observing Lin inside the cylinder. The man remarked to Song that it had been incredibly easy to deceive the two children, and Song, with a cold tone, added that even people like the children, who were seen as the lowest in society, had value when they could be used for greater purposes. Shifting the topic, the man told Song that he had done very well and that his research had the potential to help job changers break through career bottlenecks and gain strength more rapidly. He praised Song's contribution to society, stating that it would be noteworthy. Song agreed with the man, adding that each of these abyssal embryos could be sold for billions, making this research the most significant contribution to the advancement of the world. At that moment, one of Song's subordinates approached, holding an injection filled with a purple fluid. He asked Song if they should begin the experiment. Song nodded, giving his consent to proceed. The subordinate then injected the purple fluid into a bag that was to be transferred into Lin's body. As the contents entered her, Lin began screaming in agony. The onlookers, including Song and his subordinates, were stunned and unsure of how to handle the situation. Song, too, was confused by the test subject's reaction, and one of his subordinates quickly reported that the abyssal cells were rejecting the host. No energy fluctuations were detected from the subject, and the subordinate confirmed that the abyssal stem cell injection had failed. At that moment, Lin's body started to disintegrate, her form shifting into something monstrous, no longer resembling a human. The experiment had clearly failed. Despite the chaos unfolding, Song smiled and reassured everyone that there was no need to panic. It was just one body, he said, and it wasn't a major issue. After all, they still had another test subject. However, as Song spoke, one of his subordinates hurriedly informed him that someone was causing a disturbance outside the lab. Song asked who it was, and the subordinate reported that it was Lin's father, who had been relentlessly asking about Lin's whereabouts. Upon hearing this, Song grew irritated and referred to Lin's father as a hassle. He ordered the man to bring him inside, and the man agreed. Outside the lab, Lin's father was being restrained by 2 bodyguards. The man approached them and asked why they were handling a patient in such a manner. He reminded them that they were not allowed to harm a patient in the hospital. The man then informed the bodyguards that Song, the director, had asked for Lin's father to be brought inside. The bodyguards complied and released Lin's father. The man then told Lin's father that his daughter was with the director, and moments later, they entered the lab. Song greeted Lin's father and introduced himself, pointing toward Lin's body inside the water cylinder. Upon seeing the condition of his daughter, only part of her body remaining, Lin's father was left in shock, unsure of what to do. Song, however, calmly explained that Lin had voluntarily agreed to the experiment and had signed an agreement to be used as a test subject. He mentioned that there had been some issues with the procedure and offered an apology, though his tone lacked sincerity. He reassured Lin's father that, despite the unforeseen problems, they would compensate him according to the terms of the agreement. Song, however, added that they still needed to recover Lin's body for research purposes. Upon hearing this, Lin's father could no longer contain his anger. Overcome with rage, he attacked Song, delivering a direct blow while shouting for Song to return his daughter. The bodyguards quickly rushed in and restrained Lin's father, but he refused to give up, struggling to break free. He shouted that such harmful experiments should never be allowed and accused everyone there of losing their humanity. Holding his nose, injured from the blow, Song calmly responded that a cripple like Lin, unable to use her limbs, was better off contributing to society in this way rather than living a meaningless life. He added that the compensation they were offering was more than enough to repay Lin's father for the loss of his daughter. Song then told Lin's father to be grateful for the compensation and leave immediately. With tears in his eyes, Lin's father shouted at Song, arguing that Lin was still a minor and had no right to sign a life waiver. He insisted that asking her to sign it was equivalent to murder. Lin's father, in a fit of desperation, told everyone there that he did not want the money, he only wanted his daughter to be alive and well. However, Song grew increasingly annoyed with him and called him an insolent patient, ordering his bodyguards to throw him out of the hospital. As the bodyguards dragged Lin's father out, he yelled at the people there, vowing to send them all to hell and cast them into the abyss where none would escape. Song, however, ignored his words and instead turned to his subordinate, asking about the situation with Xiao Zhou. The subordinate reported that no energy had been detected and that further observation was needed. The man then asked Song if Xiao Zhou's brother would cause the same kind of trouble that Lin's father had. Song reassured him, stating that there was no need to worry. He explained that Xiao Zhou's brother was just a low-level person, a scavenger, and would not cause any trouble at all. Meanwhile, Ye Qing noticed Song's odd behavior and asked him if he knew who Ye Qing's sister was. Song nervously laughed and told Ye Qing that he had never heard of the name before. He suggested that maybe she was in the room next door. However, as he said this, Song was mentally panicking, realizing that he was in trouble. He had initially thought Xiao Zhou's brother was just a jobless scavenger, but now it seemed the opposite was true. Ye Qing, standing next to him, was actually very strong. Song feared that if this was true, he was in serious trouble, especially since the girl named Xiao Zhou that Ye Qing had mentioned earlier was the same one Song had thrown into the monster's den as a distraction while he tried to escape. As they continued walking through the labyrinth, Song seemed increasingly anxious, looking around with panic. Ye Qing, noticing his unease, asked what was wrong and whether Song had forgotten the route to the ward. Song, still looking worried, explained that he hadn't forgotten the route but was concerned that Ye Qing's sister might be in danger. He mentioned that a group of monsters had appeared in the hospital room earlier, forcing him to flee the hospital for safety. As Song spoke, he thought to himself that he was going to die. He realized that if Ye Qing discovered Xiao Zhou was dead, he would be in serious trouble. To avoid blame, Song decided he would shift the responsibility to the monsters that came from the abyss, believing this would absolve him of guilt and save him from consequences. While Song was consumed with worry about his situation, Ye Qing sensed something was wrong. Without hesitation, he grabbed hold of Song, just in time for a massive sword to fly past them. Fortunately, Ye Qing was quick enough to dodge the attack and, in the process, managed to protect Song as well. As he did, Ye Qing thought to himself that the aura from the attack didn't feel like it came from a monster. He wondered who had launched the strike, but before he could ponder further, a voice called out, apologizing for the attack. The person revealed himself as Wu Ming, who explained that he had mistaken Ye Qing and Song for monsters. Wu Ming then called out to Song, asking if he was truly Director Song, and added that he had received a commission from Lionheart to rescue him. Upon hearing Wu Ming's introduction, Ye Qing responded with an uninterested tone, asking if Wu Ming was really the one sent to rescue Song. Meanwhile, Song, clearly troubled and afraid, questioned Wu Ming, asking how he could claim to be there for a rescue when he had nearly killed Song just moments before. Ye Qing, processing the situation, realized that he should have suspected something earlier. The great sword that had nearly struck them must have left traces near the entrance of the labyrinth, and even if Wu Ming's entire team had been wiped out, Wu Ming alone would have been capable of handling the task. Wu Ming then introduced himself to Ye Qing as Nameless, a double-paid mercenary. He explained that for a high commission, losing a few teammates was not an issue for him. Ye Qing, hearing this, thought to himself that he had encountered double-paid mercenaries before. These individuals often lived in the abyss, constantly risking their lives to increase their bounties. Under certain bounty rules, they could claim all rewards for themselves, even if their entire team was wiped out. At that moment, Song spoke up and clarified that he was the person Wu Ming had been sent to rescue. He then told Wu Ming that he could take him along. Just as Song was about to leave, Ye Qing grabbed him by the collar and pulled him back, warning Song that Wu Ming did not appear to be someone there to rescue anyone. Ye Qing added that the sword Wu Ming carried seemed to exude a murderous intent. Song, confused by Ye Qing's statement, asked what kind of murderous intent he was referring to, as he felt nothing of the sort from Wu Ming. Ye Qing then assured Song that he was not trying to obstruct his mission. Turning to Wu Ming, Ye Qing explained that Song had asked him to lead the way, as Ye Qing's sister was in a room just behind where Wu Ming had come from. Upon hearing this, Wu Ming recalled seeing a little girl in the area and Ye Qing quickly asked him to tell him where his sister was. At that moment, Song was struck with shock, realizing the gravity of the situation. He knew that if Ye Qing's sister was going to speak, she would reveal everything about what Song had done to her, sealing his fate. Wu Ming threw a teddy bear towards Ye Qing, who, upon receiving it, immediately asked where it had come from. Wu Ming replied that Ye Qing's sister was very cute, though he added that it was unfortunate, as Ye Qing's sister did not make it out alive. Ye Qing was stunned by the news, while Song let out a sigh of relief, knowing that Ye Qing would never learn the truth about what had really happened to his sister. Wu Ming continued, telling Ye Qing that he had already warned his sister that if the monsters planned to harm her, he would not intervene to protect her, as he did not care about her life. However, Wu Ming added that he had promised Xiao Zhou to convey her final message to Ye Qing. Wu Ming then relayed the message, explaining that Xiao Zhou had hoped to wait at the hospital's main entrance for Ye Qing to rescue her. She wanted him to see that she was fine and that he shouldn't worry or risk coming into the labyrinth to save her. Ye Qing, however, was not satisfied with what he had heard. He refused to believe that his sister was truly gone and, in his anger, charged at Wu Ming, demanding to know why he hadn't protected Ye Qing's little sister, who was still a minor, from danger. Wu Ming, however, calmly replied that the duty of a mercenary was simply to complete the commission and receive payment. He said that he cared about nothing else. Wu Ming further explained that the curse he bore meant that anyone who followed him would surely die. Therefore, whenever he entered the labyrinth, he was always the only one to survive. As the two exchanged blows in battle, Wu Ming told Ye Qing that despite what he had said to Ye Qing's sister, she had refused to listen. He added that in the end, Wu Ming was not at fault, all the blame rested with Ye Qing's sister. Ye Qing, seething with anger, demanded to know where his sister was. Wu Ming then offered Ye Qing a deal, telling him that he could leave Director Song to Wu Ming, and in return, Wu Ming would provide him with an accurate direction to where Ye Qing's sister was. Ye Qing, upon hearing Wu Ming's words, asked what would happen if he refused to leave Song to Wu Ming alone. Wu Ming, with a cold expression, replied that if that were the case, he would show no sympathy to anyone. He added that even former comrades who had fought alongside him would be sent to hell without hesitation. As Wu Ming spoke, Ye Qing managed to gain the upper hand in the fight and forced Wu Ming to release his great sword. At that moment, Ye Qing taunted Wu Ming, telling him that without his weapon, Wu Ming wouldn't be able to do anything further. Ye Qing then aimed a powerful punch at Wu Ming, but Wu Ming swiftly grabbed hold of Ye Qing's hand. Undeterred, Ye Qing drew his dagger and attacked with it, but Wu Ming blocked the strikes and seized both of Ye Qing's hands. At that moment, Wu Ming activated his disarm skill, rendering Ye Qing's weapons useless for the next 8 seconds. Seizing the opportunity, Wu Ming delivered a brutal headbutt that sent Ye Qing stumbling backward. Regaining his composure, Ye Qing looked at Wu Ming with a surprised expression and remarked that he had initially thought Wu Ming was only proficient with a great sword, but now he realized that Wu Ming had other abilities as well. At that moment, when Wu Ming heard Ye Qing's response, he calmly explained that double-pay swordsmen were often the first to be sacrificed in battles, especially when facing unknown monsters. These warriors, hardened by countless life-and-death struggles, had developed the ability to fight even without weapons, using their bodies as tools of combat. Wu Ming's tone carried a hint of pride as he elaborated on this brutal reality. He then turned his gaze towards Ye Qing and remarked that, during their clash, he had not even used his full strength. With a commanding presence, Wu Ming raised his unsharpened great sword, his movements deliberate and calculated, before declaring that Ye Qing would now find it impossible to contend with him in this state. In that critical moment, Wu Ming unleashed his skill, rock-breaking slash, the sheer force radiating from his stance as he prepared to strike. Observing the situation intently, Ye Qing quickly analyzed the attack. While he acknowledged the immense power of the great sword, he also recognized its limitations. The weapon's weight and slow swing speed created openings that could be exploited. Ye Qing resolved to act decisively, knowing that if he could intercept the attack before it fully executed, he would have the upper hand. The battle between the two continued with unrelenting intensity. Ye Qing, now summoning his silk spider minions to aid him, fought with calculated precision. Despite his tactical advantage, he couldn't help but notice Wu Ming's exceptional speed and fluidity. The man wielded the massive great sword with surprising agility, defying the usual constraints of such a cumbersome weapon. As their clash raged on, Wu Ming's deep voice cut through the tension. He admitted, with a tone of genuine surprise, that he had not anticipated Ye Qing possessing summoning abilities. His words carried an undercurrent of intrigue, hinting at a growing respect for Ye Qing's unconventional skills even as their fierce confrontation continued. As the battle intensified, Ye Qing's silk spiders moved swiftly, shooting webs toward Wu Ming in an attempt to entangle him and slow his movements. Their coordinated assault showed promise, but Wu Ming, demonstrating his overwhelming combat prowess, easily broke free from the sticky threads. With a powerful leap into the air, he rose above the battlefield, his presence commanding as he looked down upon Ye Qing. In that moment, he made it clear through his actions and words that relying solely on summon monsters would not be enough to stop him. His tone carried a mix of mockery and confidence, an unshakable belief in his own strength. Mid-air, Wu Ming activated his devastating skill, rock-shattering strike, channeling tremendous power into his blade as he aimed for the ground where Ye Qing and his minions stood. However, Ye Qing's reflexes were sharp, and his instincts, honed by countless battles, allowed him to evade the incoming attack. By the time Wu Ming's blade struck the earth, sending tremors through the battlefield and scattering the summoned spiders, Ye Qing was already behind him. Taking advantage of the brief opening, Ye Qing charged forward with precision, intending to deliver a decisive sneak attack while his opponent's focus remained on the aftermath of his own strike. Yet, as Ye Qing closed the distance, Wu Ming's heightened senses came into play. He had already detected Ye Qing's movement and, without turning, addressed the intent behind the approach. His words, laced with disdain, warned Ye Qing against underestimating him and suggested that relying on such tactics would not be enough to ensure victory. Undeterred by Wu Ming's response, Ye Qing launched a powerful strike, putting all his might and precision into the attack. The blow carried enough force to potentially turn the tide of the battle, but Wu Ming, as if expecting it all along, managed to block the attack with ease. The clash of their strength sent ripples of energy through the air, forcing both combatants to back away momentarily, creating space between them. As they prepared for the next exchange, Wu Ming's voice cut through the tension, his words a mixture of acknowledgement and superiority. He pointed out that if not for the immense weight of his sword offsetting the full force of Ye Qing's punch, a strike that carried the accumulated energy of hundreds of power points, the attack might have pierced clean through his body. His calm but resolute tone conveyed both admiration for the raw strength Ye Qing had displayed and confidence that such power alone would not be enough to bring him down. The battlefield remained charged with the lingering energy of their clash, both combatants prepared for the next decisive moment. Wu Ming, after delivering his remarks, acknowledged Ye Qing with a tone that carried both respect and intrigue. He admitted that after facing Ye Qing in battle, it had become clear that Ye Qing was far from the ranks of those incompetent Level 0 personnel. Wu Ming noted that Ye Qing's strength was extraordinary, surpassing expectations and revealing the potential of a formidable warrior. There was no arrogance in his statement, only the candid recognition of an opponent whose abilities demanded respect. Hearing this, Ye Qing responded without hesitation, his voice steady yet edged with defiance. He remarked on Wu Ming's so-called proud combat skills, pointing out that he himself was not far behind in terms of technique or power. His words carried a mixture of challenge and determination, his confidence unshaken even in the face of Wu Ming's overwhelming strength. As he spoke, his expression shifted to one of irritation, his frustration spilling over as he demanded once again to know the whereabouts of his younger sister. The urgency in his voice was unmistakable, his emotions laid bare in that moment as he pressed Wu Ming for answers. The conversation pulled Wu Ming's thoughts into the past, a memory that lingered in his mind. He recalled a time when he was with Xiao Zhou, Ye Qing's younger sister. In that moment, Xiao Zhou had looked up at him with an air of curiosity and admiration. She had told him that he was very strong, her words carrying the innocent awe of someone witnessing greatness. Then, with a thoughtful expression, she had asked Wu Ming who he thought was stronger, himself or her brother, Ye Qing. The question had caught Wu Ming off guard, her straightforwardness momentarily unsettling him. Xiao Zhou had not stopped there. She continued speaking, her voice filled with pride and affection as she talked about her brother. She described Ye Qing as the best brother in the world, her tone unwavering as she painted a picture of his unwavering determination. She explained that, although her brother was just a scavenger by profession, he was fighting hard every single day to improve himself, striving to grow stronger and change his fate. Her words carried an undercurrent of deep admiration, revealing the depth of her respect and love for her brother. With a wistful smile, Xiao Zhou had shared her dream of one day becoming as strong as Ye Qing, her voice full of hope and determination. Wu Ming, reflecting on that memory, found himself unable to ignore the significance of Xiao Zhou's words, her unwavering faith in her brother's strength leaving an impression on him. The connection between the siblings and the strength of their bond was evident even in her innocent remarks. Now, standing before Ye Qing in the heat of battle, Wu Ming couldn't help but feel the weight of those words as he measured the man fighting so fiercely to protect the sister who admired him so deeply. Wu Ming, hearing Xiao Zhou speak so passionately about her brother, couldn't help but interject with his own perspective. He explained, in a measured tone, that based on what he knew, the role of a scavenger was typically reserved for level 1 personnel and low-level class changers. It was a job defined more by necessity and circumstance than by strength or skill. To Wu Ming, it was not a role that inherently signified greatness or capability. However, his words struck a nerve with Xiao Zhou, whose admiration for her brother was unshakable. Her face hardened with anger, and she retorted sharply, accusing Wu Ming of lying. She refused to believe that his assessment could be true, defending her brother with an unwavering conviction. Moments later, her expression softened, her anger replaced by a bright, almost glowing pride as she spoke of Ye Qing once more. She explained how, whenever she looked into her brother's determined eyes or observed his hands, scarred and calloused from endless effort, she felt assured that her brother was a true warrior. To Xiao Zhou, these were not the traits of a mere scavenger but of someone who fought relentlessly to protect what mattered and to rise above his station. Her voice carried an almost reverent tone as she expressed the depth of her admiration. Wu Ming, listening intently, was struck by the depth of her words. He could see that her respect for Ye Qing went far beyond simple familial love, it was rooted in her recognition of his unyielding spirit. After hearing her heartfelt description, Wu Ming found himself intrigued. He told Xiao Zhou that he now wished to meet this brother of hers, this man who had earned her admiration so completely. Xiao Zhou's face lit up at the suggestion, and with a smile, she assured Wu Ming that when the time was right, she would gladly introduce the two of them to each other. Back in the present, Wu Ming's mind returned to the battlefield, his thoughts grounding him in the heat of combat. He looked at Ye Qing with an appraising gaze and remarked that the look in Ye Qing's eyes was unmistakable. It was a gaze forged in the crucible of countless life and death trials, one that spoke of resilience, determination, and an indomitable will. Wu Ming recognized it because he had seen it in himself and in others who had walked a similar path. Ye Qing, hearing Wu Ming's words, felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. His body was battered, and the battle had pushed him to his limits, but he knew there was still a chance to turn the tide. Reaching into his belongings, he pulled out his last potion, the final resource he had to sustain himself. This was a critical moment, a turning point that could determine the outcome of their fierce confrontation. Ye Qing resolved to use the potion, his mind focused entirely on overcoming Wu Ming and achieving victory in this grueling encounter. The battlefield, charged with tension, awaited the next decisive move. Ye Qing took a moment to assess the situation, his mind racing as he analyzed Wu Ming's capabilities. He realized that he could see Wu Ming's basic stats, noting that Wu Ming was categorized as a dual-handed swordsman. What stood out to Ye Qing was that Wu Ming's health bar, while respectable, was not overwhelmingly high. This observation led Ye Qing to formulate a strategy. He considered that if he could stack berserk damage buffs, capitalize on a lucky critical hit, and exploit Wu Ming's weak points, it might be possible to defeat him within 3 well-placed strikes. However, as Ye Qing continued to observe his opponent, he noticed that Wu Ming seemed markedly different from the other human class changers he had encountered. Wu Ming's lack of conventional armor was striking, and aside from the great sword he wielded, he carried no other equipment. This unusual setup piqued Ye Qing's curiosity. He quickly deduced that Wu Ming was entirely focused on offense, committing fully to his attacks with no apparent regard for defense. Ye Qing began to wonder if Wu Ming's fighting style was a variation of the inclusion body style of combat, a form that emphasized sheer power and relentless aggression over any defensive measures. Before Ye Qing could fully process his thoughts, Wu Ming charged toward him with incredible speed, closing the distance between them in an instant. The attack was powerful, the swing of the great sword cutting through the air with force that demanded respect. Ye Qing managed to evade the strike just in time, his movements quick and precise, but the encounter left him with an unsettling realization. Despite successfully dodging the attack, he noted the speed at which it had been executed. Wu Ming's assault was not only forceful but also faster than Ye Qing had anticipated, adding another layer of difficulty to the battle. As Ye Qing steadied himself, he understood that the fight ahead would require every ounce of his focus and skill to overcome this formidable opponent. At that moment, Ye Qing activated his soul dash skill, propelling himself forward with a burst of speed and precision. The attack he unleashed was devastating, landing squarely on Wu Ming and leaving a severe injury across his body. However, as Ye Qing struck, he noticed something peculiar. Wu Ming was not attempting to dodge the attacks at all. Instead, Wu Ming seemed indifferent to being hit, his expression remaining focused and unyielding. This lack of reaction struck Ye Qing as unusual, and a sense of unease began to creep over him. While trying to make sense of the situation, Ye Qing's sharp eyes caught sight of something strange. A faint crack had formed on Wu Ming's neck, small yet unnatural, and it left Ye Qing momentarily stunned. He couldn't fathom what was happening to Wu Ming's body, but the sight only deepened the mystery surrounding his opponent. Despite this, Wu Ming showed no sign of faltering. He continued to press forward, relentlessly exchanging blows with Ye Qing, his attacks as unrelenting as ever. After a heated flurry of strikes, the two fighters briefly paused, both regaining their stances and assessing one another. It was during this lull that Wu Ming spoke, his voice steady and composed. He explained to Ye Qing that he possessed a unique trait, one that rendered him impervious to being killed by ordinary means. This revelation shocked Ye Qing, who realized with a growing sense of disbelief that Wu Ming was, in essence, immortal. Wu Ming continued, elaborating on the nature of his resilience. He explained that the abyss was a realm filled with entities that defied the comprehension of modern technology. Within that chaotic domain, the conventional rules governing professions, skills, attributes, and equipment were often rendered meaningless. Wu Ming revealed that there existed something even more enigmatic and powerful than these, the existence of curses. These curses, he hinted, were an entirely different phenomenon, a force that could not be explained or countered by ordinary logic. As Ye Qing absorbed this unsettling information, he began to grasp the true gravity of the battle he was fighting and the extraordinary nature of his opponent. Wu Ming then elaborated further, his tone laced with bitterness and anger. He explained that curses were a form of divine punishment, a burden one must bear when seeking immense strength. Despite the fear of death that lingered in one's heart, the desire to test the fragile boundary between life and death often became irresistible. Wu Ming described how such a pursuit often led individuals to claim wealth and power that were not rightfully theirs, driven by a relentless determination to hoard it all without sharing even a fraction. He continued, his words growing more impassioned, as he spoke of the unpredictable nature of the gods. These gods, he said, might take notice of someone's defiance, not out of favor or benevolence, but perhaps out of amusement or a cruel desire to mock their fate. From such divine attention, one might finally obtain the power they had longed for, the strength to transcend their mortal limits. However, as Wu Ming's voice rose, his expression twisted in fury. He admitted that while he had gained absolute power, the gods had never warned him of the price he would pay. They had taken from him the thing he cherished most, leaving him with nothing but anger and despair. As Wu Ming's emotions erupted, his anger boiling over, Ye Qing observed his behavior closely. The realization struck him like a thunderbolt: Wu Ming possessed an undead trait. The way Wu Ming carried himself, his unnatural resilience, and his apparent immortality all pointed to this grim conclusion. It was clear to Ye Qing that the man standing before him was no ordinary opponent. At that moment, Song spoke up, breaking the tense silence. He addressed Ye Qing with a tone of certainty, affirming that the rumors about the abyss were true. He explained that when hunters ventured into the abyss and changed professions, they often inherited traits from the monsters they encountered. Song added that the undead trait was among the most formidable of these characteristics, granting its bearer the ability to regenerate infinitely, so long as they did not exhaust their energy. As Song's words settled in Ye Qing's mind, the reality of Wu Ming's power and the challenges ahead became even clearer. Wu Ming spoke with a somber tone, recounting the grim tale of his past. He described one fateful moment when he had been on the brink of death, his life hanging by a thread. In that instant, his hand had reached out and touched eternity itself. From that moment forward, a strange and cruel phenomenon had taken hold of him. No matter how many times he was killed, he would always return to life. Again and again, the cycle repeated, each revival a stark reminder of his cursed existence. He reflected on those early days, recalling how he had once believed himself to be a lone star of misfortune. Every mission he undertook with his team seemed to end in tragedy. While all his teammates perished, he alone would return alive, unscathed by the horrors that had claimed the others. This pattern continued unabated, to the point where whispers of doubt and suspicion began to spread among his peers. His survival became a source of unease for those around him, and many started to question whether it was merely misfortune or something more sinister at play. The accusations were, in some ways, understandable. As a double-salary swordsman in his mercenary group, Wu Ming stood to gain significantly when his teammates died. If he returned as the sole survivor, he would claim the entire commission for himself. Although there was no tangible proof that he was responsible for the deaths of his comrades, the repeated pattern of his solitary survival made it difficult for others not to view him as a team killer. This stigma grew so severe that hunters began avoiding any mission that involved Wu Ming, unwilling to risk their lives for what they saw as an inevitable sacrifice. Turning his attention back to Ye Qing, Wu Ming spoke with an air of finality. He admitted that he had paid the ultimate price for eternity, a price that had condemned him to an unending cycle of life and death. He explained that he had died countless times, yet each time he had been brought back, perpetually caught in a loop that denied him the release of true death. His words carried the weight of years spent grappling with the curse that had shaped his life, a curse that had made him both feared and isolated. At that critical moment, Wu Ming activated one of his most devastating abilities, the Wish of Death. This skill could only be triggered when his health dropped below 33%. Once activated, it doubled the damage Wu Ming received but also doubled the damage he inflicted. The sheer risk and reward of the skill made it a fearsome choice, especially when paired with his undead trait, which rendered him immune to death. For Ye Qing, the combination was overwhelmingly powerful, akin to fighting an opponent with the odds stacked entirely in their favor. Wu Ming could take what should have been lethal damage without consequence, all while delivering devastating blows if he managed to land a hit. As Wu Ming charged forward, his sword gleaming with lethal intent, he delivered a powerful slash aimed directly at Ye Qing. The attack struck cleanly, splitting its target down the middle. However, it was not Ye Qing himself but one of his clones that had been cut apart, sparing him from what would have been a devastating blow. Realizing the dire nature of his predicament, Ye Qing retreated to buy himself a moment to regroup and charge his next attack. As Ye Qing prepared his strike, he reflected on Wu Ming's undead trait and its apparent invincibility. The thought gnawed at him, and he questioned whether such a power could truly be overcome. Gathering his resolve, Ye Qing launched himself toward Wu Ming with all the force he could muster, determined to find a way through the seemingly insurmountable challenge. Wu Ming, standing firm, declared that their battle's outcome had already been decided. In his eyes, his victory was inevitable, a foregone conclusion. He slashed at Ye Qing again with tremendous speed, but Ye Qing managed to evade the attack by a narrow margin. In that instant, Ye Qing called upon his divine artifact to aid him, the mystical item glowing with power as he wielded it against Wu Ming. When Wu Ming noticed the artifact, his expression shifted slightly, betraying a flicker of surprise. He recognized it as a green-grade divine artifact, a rare and powerful item. For a moment, he seemed to acknowledge the challenge it presented, but his confidence remained unshaken as he prepared for the next phase of their relentless clash. At that moment, Wu Ming turned his attention to the monster that had just emerged from Ye Qing's divine artifact. With a swift and precise movement, he attempted to strike the creature, but the monster nimbly dodged the attack. In the same instant, the creature countered with its own strike, landing a successful hit on Wu Ming. As the blow connected, Wu Ming's expression shifted, and he realized that this monster was not dealing physical damage but was instead a manifestation of a skill effect tied to something much deeper. Ye Qing, observing Wu Ming's reaction, calmly explained that when a target dies from the skill, it triggers a trait known as Despair Harvest. This effect would gradually restore both his health and mana with each successful hit on the enemy. Ye Qing elaborated that since Wu Ming's body was already dead, every strike against him would trigger the activation of Despair Harvest, causing his mana and health to recover slowly over time. He then further explained that the reason the undead could continue to live was due to their reliance on mana. In Wu Ming's case, the health bar he saw was merely a facade, a superficial measurement, and his true health was defined by the mana that flowed within him, a value that could not be detected by ordinary means. Wu Ming, listening to Ye Qing's analysis, remained quiet for a moment. Finally, he spoke, acknowledging that Ye Qing had figured out the nature of his existence. He admitted that Ye Qing's perceptiveness was beyond anything he had encountered with other adventurers, and that his ability to discern the truth of a situation was impressive, even among seasoned hunters like himself. Wu Ming had come to recognize that Ye Qing was not an ordinary opponent, and his sharp intellect would make him a formidable adversary in this battle. At that moment, Ye Qing turned to Wu Ming and calmly stated that the abyss was filled with the power of rules. He explained that every seemingly unsolvable puzzle had a solution, and every seemingly invincible force had a way to break it. Ye Qing pointed out that a powerful person could sometimes be nothing more than a clumsy brute, while a glass cannon might be capable of inflicting devastating damage, yet remain easily killed. He continued, explaining that even a body that appeared invincible might have a hidden vulnerability outside its physical form. In Wu Ming's case, Ye Qing noted that while Wu Ming wore no armor and fought with a self-sacrificial style, he deliberately misled his enemies into thinking they could trade blows with him. However, Ye Qing clarified that the life-for-life fighting style, while deceptive, could never truly defeat Wu Ming. Instead, it was a flaw Wu Ming had allowed his enemies to see, a calculated risk. Wu Ming, after hearing Ye Qing's reasoning, nodded in agreement. He acknowledged that in the abyss, survival was not about brute strength alone but about understanding and manipulating the rules of the world. Wu Ming then suggested that Ye Qing must also have his own fatal flaw, just as he did. He pointed out that in the grand scheme of things, no one was without weaknesses. Strength, agility, intelligence, constitution, willpower, and luck. Wu Ming reasoned that among these 6 attributes, there must be one that Ye Qing could not fully cover. Ye Qing, however, was quick to respond, apologizing to Wu Ming and explaining that he was a bit different from most class changers. While he understood Wu Ming's logic, Ye Qing's unique abilities set him apart, and his weaknesses were not as easily defined as they might be for others. Ye Qing explained to Wu Ming that he had an abundance of excess points at his disposal, which he preferred to distribute evenly whenever he leveled up. He proudly referred to himself as a hexagonal warrior, someone proficient in all aspects of combat. With those words in mind, Ye Qing charged toward Wu Ming, determined to strike before his opponent's wounds could heal. The urgency of the situation fueled his resolve, as Ye Qing knew he needed to end the battle swiftly to maintain his advantage. As Ye Qing launched his attack, Wu Ming reacted quickly, managing to block the incoming blow. In that instant, Wu Ming couldn't help but assess his opponent's capabilities. Ye Qing's speed, strength, and reflexes were far superior to those of ordinary profession changers. Wu Ming realized that Ye Qing had reached this extraordinary level of power at a remarkably young age, and his earlier claims about himself were far from exaggerated. The intense clash continued, each strike showcasing Ye Qing's versatility and control over his abilities. During the fight, Ye Qing confidently stated that he had mastered every aspect of combat, whether it was peculiar techniques, raw physical power, or even the obscure talents others often dismissed as useless. He had refined them all to perfection. Ye Qing went on to elaborate that while physical attacks alone might not be enough to kill Wu Ming, the battle's prolonged nature would ultimately work in his favor. The continuous consumption of mana would gradually weaken Wu Ming's regeneration, wearing him down over time. Ye Qing was resolute, knowing that as long as he maintained the fight, Wu Ming's mana reserves would eventually deplete, leaving him vulnerable to defeat. Wu Ming was beginning to falter in his battle against Ye Qing as the toll on his mana reserves became increasingly evident. His movements were slightly slower, his attacks less forceful, and his defenses weaker than before. Sensing the shift in momentum, Ye Qing capitalized on the opportunity, channeling his divine art once again to summon a fearsome monster. The creature, brimming with menacing power, charged at Wu Ming with relentless aggression. In the chaos that followed, the monster landed a devastating blow, severing one of Wu Ming's arms and leaving him in a state of pain and vulnerability. Ye Qing seized the moment to assert his dominance, pointing out that in a prolonged battle of endurance, his advantages would inevitably tilt the scales in his favor. Wu Ming, however, despite his injuries and dwindling mana, refused to yield to despair. He reflected on the situation, realizing that even the most intricate and seemingly unbreakable puzzle must have a solution hidden within its design. Just as Ye Qing had so confidently demonstrated his mastery, Wu Ming recognized that every strength often concealed an underlying weakness, one that could be exploited if discovered. Wu Ming concluded that Ye Qing's vulnerability might not lie within his combat prowess but in something external to the battlefield. As Wu Ming's gaze flickered around the battlefield, his attention was drawn to a small, innocuous object lying on the ground, a teddy bear that Ye Qing had once gifted to Xiao Zhou. The sight of it struck an odd chord, and Wu Ming immediately understood its significance. Ye Qing, too, noticed the bear and found himself momentarily puzzled, wondering how and when it had fallen from his pocket. The brief lapse in Ye Qing's focus provided Wu Ming with the opening he needed. Summoning every ounce of his remaining strength, Wu Ming launched himself toward Ye Qing with surprising speed and determination. The sudden assault caught Ye Qing off guard, his composure slipping as Wu Ming closed the distance between them in an instant. With unwavering ferocity, Wu Ming grabbed Ye Qing by the head and slammed him into the ground with enough force to rattle the air. The impact left Ye Qing stunned, a crack in his invincible facade now visible. Despite the history they might have shared, Wu Ming showed no hesitation or remorse. He declared his resolve with cold clarity, affirming that he would extend no mercy to someone who stood in his way. To Wu Ming, loyalty and camaraderie meant little if they conflicted with his ultimate goals. Even if Ye Qing had once fought alongside him as a trusted ally, Wu Ming would cast aside such bonds without hesitation, prepared to consign former teammates to the depths of oblivion if they dared to challenge him. With these thoughts fueling his actions, Wu Ming braced himself for the next move in their grueling battle. As Wu Ming continued speaking, he added a striking observation about Ye Qing. Despite everything, Ye Qing remained distinct from most adversaries Wu Ming had faced. He still upheld the morals and principles of a living person, unwilling to compromise his values even under extreme circumstances. Wu Ming acknowledged that Ye Qing's actions were rooted in a sense of duty and honor, which persisted despite knowing that the person he was protecting, Song Qingshan, was unworthy of such dedication. It was a paradox that intrigued Wu Ming, this unwavering commitment to a cause that might not deserve it. In that moment, Wu Ming posed a question that reverberated like a thunderclap. He asked Ye Qing how he planned to choose between the life of his own sister and that of Song Qingshan. The question stunned Ye Qing, leaving him momentarily speechless. It was not just the weight of the choice that shocked him but also the revelation buried within Wu Ming's words. Ye Qing was taken aback by the implication that his sister was alive. Ye Qing's shock deepened as Wu Ming clarified his earlier remarks. Wu Ming reminded him that he had never explicitly stated that Ye Qing's sister had died. He explained that the teddy bear Ye Qing carried had been nothing more than a token, a calculated move to convince Ye Qing that Wu Ming knew where his sister was. Wu Ming then smiled, his expression filled with both cunning and a trace of amusement, as he remarked that Ye Qing's sister shared something in common with Ye Qing: she was not easy to kill. The words lingered in the air, cutting through Ye Qing's defenses and leaving him overwhelmed with confusion and urgency. Ye Qing, his mind racing with questions, demanded answers. He needed Wu Ming to explain clearly what was happening and to shed light on the fate of his sister. The weight of uncertainty pressed down on him, and he struggled to reconcile the emotions stirred by Wu Ming's revelations. Elsewhere, a few hours prior to this confrontation, a different battle had unfolded. As Wu Ming fought against the orcs, Xiao Zhou found herself in a life-threatening situation. One of the ogres had grabbed her by the neck, its immense hand squeezing tightly as it prepared to end her life. In that terrifying moment, Xiao Zhou's thoughts drifted to Wu Ming's earlier words. He had warned her that he would not intervene if a monster attacked her, as she had not commissioned him for protection. Wu Ming had made it clear that he did not care what happened to her, his actions dictated solely by the terms of their arrangement. Tears welled up in Xiao Zhou's eyes, cascading down her cheeks as despair set in. In her desperation, she recalled something her big brother Ye Qing had once told her. He had promised her that he had found a job that earned a significant amount of money. He assured her that it would be enough to pay for the treatment needed to heal her legs, giving her the ability to stand and walk again. Ye Qing had asked her to wait for him just a little longer, vowing to return with the means to change her life. Xiao Zhou clung to that memory as her strength waned, her brother's words offering a fragile sliver of hope amidst the terror surrounding her. In that desperate moment, Xiao Zhou thought to herself that she did not want to remain a burden. She did not want to be a nuisance to her brother or anyone else, nor did she want to be seen as useless or incapable of standing on her own. The weight of her dependence on her brother gnawed at her, and she silently apologized to him for not being stronger. Summoning every ounce of her resolve, she called out to the heavens, pleading for strength to face the dire situation before her. She wished, even for just a moment, to have the power to protect herself and not rely on others for her survival. As her heartfelt plea echoed in her mind, a brilliant purple glow began to radiate from her body, engulfing her in an aura of energy that felt both foreign and empowering. At that moment, a system notification materialized in her vision, informing her of an unlocked skill called Shapeshifter. The description of the skill barely registered in her mind before her body underwent an incredible transformation. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Zhou's small frame grew, morphing into a massive beast resembling a towering teddy bear. Her newfound form exuded raw power, and her fear dissipated as instinct took over. Wasting no time, Xiao Zhou turned her attention to the ogre, her movements now swift and deliberate. With a single powerful strike, she eliminated the creature that had moments ago held her life in its grasp. The entire ordeal unfolded in seconds, the ogre falling before it could even comprehend the change in its prey. As Xiao Zhou stood over the defeated foe, the battlefield seemed to pause, her immense form drawing all attention. Nearby, Wu Ming observed the transformation with a mixture of intrigue and caution. He recognized the signs of abyss cell influence, an unnatural power capable of granting immense strength but often at a terrible cost. Wu Ming reflected on what he knew about abyss cells, considering the common belief that those who succumb to their temptation often lost their sanity, becoming mindless monsters driven solely by destruction. He surmised that Xiao Zhou might have been one of those unfortunate victims. Concerned that her transformation had overtaken her mind, Wu Ming prepared himself to intervene. He decided that if Xiao Zhou had indeed been consumed by the abyss, it was his duty to stop her before she became a danger to everyone around her. As he readied his next move, Wu Ming spoke out, explaining what he knew about the effects of abyss cells. He noted that individuals altered by their influence often lost all sense of self, turning into uncontrollable beasts that attacked indiscriminately. To his surprise, Xiao Zhou responded, her voice trembling and tears still streaming from her eyes. She expressed her confusion, asking Wu Ming what had happened to her. She admitted that everything felt strange and foreign. Her perspective had shifted, and she could feel the ground beneath her feet for the first time in years. She noticed that she was much taller and could walk with ease, yet her new form felt alien and overwhelming. Xiao Zhou's tearful voice and evident self-awareness gave Wu Ming pause, forcing him to reconsider his assumptions. Wu Ming was taken aback as Xiao Zhou spoke, her voice clear and coherent despite the transformation she had undergone. He had expected her to lose her mind, as was common for those affected by abyss cells, but her self-awareness remained intact. Curious and cautious, he decided to test her further. He asked Xiao Zhou to tell him her name, a question meant to gauge whether she could still recall her identity amidst the chaos. Without hesitation, Xiao Zhou answered, stating that her name was Yi Xiao Zhou. Her response caught Wu Ming off guard, confirming that she had retained her sense of self. For a moment, a flicker of relief crossed his face, and he acknowledged aloud that it was truly her. Xiao Zhou, still overwhelmed by the transformation, turned to a nearby reflective surface. As she looked at herself, she froze, stunned by the sight of the massive teddy bear-like creature she had become. The sight of her new form left her disoriented, and she struggled to reconcile her reflection with her identity. Meanwhile, Wu Ming observed her reaction, noting her distress. He remarked with a tinge of irony that he was unsure whether to congratulate her on the awakening of her skill. But before his words could sink in, Xiao Zhou began crying again, tears of fear and frustration spilling down her face. She confessed that she no longer felt human, lamenting the monstrous appearance that now defined her. The thought of facing her brother in this form filled her with shame, and she admitted she could not bear the idea of Ye Qing seeing her like this. Desperately, she turned to Wu Ming, asking what she should do about her situation, her voice filled with uncertainty and desperation. Wu Ming, however, was growing impatient. He saw her emotional outburst as a distraction from the mission at hand. He bluntly reminded her that the skill was hers, not his, and that he was in no position to tell her how to handle it. His tone was curt as he explained that it was up to her to decide how to move forward. He then shifted the conversation back to his priorities, stating that if Xiao Zhou no longer wished to accompany him, she was free to leave. He made it clear that he would continue his mission to locate and rescue the person he had been commissioned to save, with or without her assistance. Xiao Zhou, though still shaken, nodded as if accepting his words. She reached into her belongings and retrieved the small teddy bear that her brother had once given her. With trembling hands, she handed it to Wu Ming, her expression filled with both sadness and resolve. She asked him to deliver the teddy bear to her brother, Ye Qing, along with a message. She wanted Wu Ming to tell Ye Qing that she needed time to come to terms with what had happened to her and to prepare herself mentally for whatever lay ahead. She admitted that the transformation had left her utterly shocked, and she needed to find her own way to cope with the changes. Wu Ming took the bear, his expression unreadable as he accepted her request. Without another word, he turned back to the path ahead, his mind already refocusing on the mission. Xiao Zhou watched him go, her massive form casting a long shadow in the dim light. Though her future was uncertain, a spark of determination began to take root in her heart. She resolved that when the time came, she would face her brother not as a burden but as someone capable of standing on her own. Wu Ming accepted the teddy bear from Xiao Zhou with a steady hand and assured her that if he managed to meet her older brother, he would personally relay her words. His tone carried a rare hint of sincerity, as though he recognized the weight of her message. As Xiao Zhou watched him depart, a mix of determination and sadness lingered in her gaze, knowing that her fate was now entwined with her own strength. Returning to the present, Wu Ming faced Ye Qing once more, the intensity of their confrontation momentarily suspended. He spoke with unwavering confidence, stating that if their battle were to continue, he would inevitably gain the upper hand. Yet, despite his desire to see the full extent of Ye Qing's capabilities, he acknowledged that there was no meaningful reason for the two of them to be at odds. His words carried a sense of pragmatism, urging Ye Qing to reconsider the fight. Meanwhile, Song Qingshan, standing nearby, was visibly shaken. The revelation that Xiao Zhou was still alive sent him spiraling into panic. Fear and confusion clouded his thoughts, leaving him immobilized as he struggled to grasp the unfolding situation. Wu Ming, taking advantage of Song's stunned state, directed his words back to Ye Qing, his tone cutting and deliberate. He revealed that the true source of the danger surrounding Xiao Zhou was none other than Song himself. Wu Ming explained that Song's reckless actions had invited the abyss into the area, setting off the chain of events that had endangered Xiao Zhou. His words hung heavy in the air, and as the implications of his accusation settled in, Song's face turned pale. He stood frozen, his body stiff with shock, unable to refute Wu Ming's damning declaration. The confrontation triggered a memory for Wu Ming, pulling him back to the events that had taken place within the hospital. In the dim confines of a secluded room, Wu Ming had stood face to face with Lin's father. The older man's face was etched with resolve and fury, his voice trembling with a mix of desperation and anger. He had explained his plan, the only one he had left to enact revenge against Song Qingshan. Lin's father had detailed his intentions, holding a small, mysterious key in his hand. He claimed that by using the key to open any door within the facility, the abyss power would surge through the lab, engulfing it entirely. It was a drastic and irreversible act, one that would unleash chaos and destruction. But Lin's father was unrelenting, his focus solely on ensuring that Song would never leave the abyss, not in body and certainly not in soul. His face twisted with emotion as he spoke, his words carrying the weight of years of pain and loss. He vowed to sink not only Song's research but also his very existence into the depths of the abyss. The anger in his voice was palpable, fueled by the suffering his family had endured. Wu Ming had listened intently, and when Lin's father finished speaking, he asked a single question, his voice calm yet probing. He asked Lin's father if he fully understood the consequences of his actions. Did he truly comprehend the cost of what he was about to unleash? The question hung in the air, a final chance for Lin's father to reconsider. Without hesitation, the man responded with unwavering certainty. He stated that he was fully aware of the repercussions but was prepared to face them without regret. For him, the price was worth paying if it meant making Song pay for what he had done and ensuring that no one else would suffer at his hands. Wu Ming had silently observed the determination in Lin's father's eyes, the raw conviction that left no room for doubt. It was a moment that had etched itself into Wu Ming's memory, one that added another layer to the complicated web of actions and motivations that had led to this moment in his clash with Ye Qing. In the present, Song Qingshan was overcome with panic, fully aware of the precarious position he found himself in. Desperately trying to salvage the situation, he hastily began to defend himself. With a strained voice, he addressed Wu Ming and Ye Qing, claiming that he had already devised a compensation plan for Lin Xian's suffering. He further added, almost dismissively, that Lin's father had been dealt with as well. However, his words had the opposite of the intended effect. Ye Qing, upon hearing this, felt his fury boil over. The notion that Song believed such actions could be rectified with a simple plan of compensation was an insult to everything Ye Qing held dear. Yet, oblivious to the growing rage in Ye Qing's expression, Song continued speaking, as if he could reason his way out of the predicament. He brazenly declared that Lin Shuyan was little more than a useless burden, suggesting that Lin's father had wasted his resources on an impossible dream. He argued that Lin's treatment was a futile endeavor, something that could never result in a normal life. Ye Qing's fists clenched tighter with every word, his emotions teetering on the edge of an uncontrollable eruption. When Song finally noticed Ye Qing's unyielding glare, a flicker of fear crossed his face. Stammering, he scrambled to address the unspoken accusation looming in the air. He quickly insisted that Xiao Zhou's situation was entirely different and that Yi Qing was misunderstanding his intentions. Song, now visibly trembling, claimed that Xiao Zhou had merely fallen into the abyss by chance and that he had been powerless to save her. In a last-ditch effort to justify himself, Song added that even if Xiao Zhou had been involved in some form of experiment, it had ultimately been her own choice to participate. With a frantic tone, he attempted to placate Yi Qing by offering compensation, regardless of whether Xiao Zhou was alive or dead. Song's words were hurried and hollow, his desperation dripping from every syllable. But Yi Qing's patience had long since worn thin. The moment Song suggested compensating him for what Xiao Zhou had endured, something inside Yi Qing snapped. His face contorted with unrestrained fury, and without hesitation, he launched a devastating punch toward Song. The force of the blow sent Song hurtling through the air before crashing hard onto the ground, leaving him sprawled and gasping for breath. Yi Qing's voice roared through the air, filled with righteous indignation. His words cut through the tension like a blade, carrying the full weight of his rage. He declared that such a situation could never be resolved with monetary compensation or hollow apologies. It was not a matter of settling accounts but one of justice and accountability, and Yi Qing had no intention of letting Song escape the consequences of his actions. As Song lay on the ground, groaning in pain, Yi Qing loomed over him, his presence as imposing as a thunderstorm. The room seemed to tremble under the force of his anger, and it was clear that Song's time of reckoning had arrived. Song, his face battered and bruised, lay sprawled on the ground, his voice trembling as he defiantly tried to defend himself. He sneered at Yi Qing, dismissing Xiao Zhou as a worthless cripple who could not even walk, questioning what value she could possibly hold. With a derisive tone, Song asked Yi Qing why he cherished someone like Xiao Zhou so much. He added, with a twisted sense of justification, that if he had used Xiao Zhou as a test subject, it was only to maximize her potential, to ensure her existence served a greater purpose. Song went on to claim that the sacrifices made in the name of scientific research were noble, as they benefited all job changers. In his delusional arrogance, he declared that Xiao Zhou should have felt honored to contribute to such a grand cause. But Song's words only fueled Yi Qing's unrelenting rage. The very notion that Xiao Zhou's suffering could be reduced to some warped idea of utility was unforgivable. Yi Qing's expression hardened, his fury boiling over into an uncontainable storm. Without a moment's hesitation, Yi Qing summoned the recycling monster, its massive form towering over Song as it grasped him in its unyielding grip, lifting him high into the air. Song's bravado dissolved into terror as he dangled helplessly, his eyes wide with panic. Yi Qing's voice was low and menacing, filled with a venomous intensity that made the air around him seem heavy. He told Song that Xiao Zhou was more than just a test subject or a tool for others to exploit. She was the only family Yi Qing had left, the one person he had vowed to protect at all costs. Yi Qing's words were like thunderclaps, echoing with the pain of someone who had lost too much already. He added that someone like Song, who had no concept of love or loyalty, could never understand what Xiao Zhou meant to him. Desperately, Song stammered an apology, his voice faltering as he tried to retract his earlier statements. But Yi Qing was far beyond the point of listening. With an enraged roar, he slammed Song into the ground with such force that the earth beneath them seemed to shudder. Song groaned in pain, his arrogance shattered along with his body. Yi Qing leaned over, his grip tightening around Song as he lifted him once more. His eyes burned with righteous fury as he told Song that he was nothing but a worthless piece of trash, someone so vile that even hell would reject him. Each word dripped with the weight of Yi Qing's disdain, leaving no doubt about the depth of his anger. With a final, disgusted growl, Yi Qing hurled Song across the space toward Wu Ming, his motion swift and decisive. As Song's battered form landed near Wu Ming, Yi Qing's voice rang out with cold finality, declaring that Song was no longer his concern. He had no further interest in dealing with such a despicable individual and left Song's fate in Wu Ming's hands. Wu Ming, standing calmly amidst the chaos, watched the scene unfold with a faint smile. There was a glint of approval in his eyes as he turned his attention to Yi Qing. With a tone that carried both amusement and satisfaction, Wu Ming remarked that it seemed they had finally reached an understanding. The unspoken agreement between them solidified in that moment, a shared resolve to ensure that Song would face the full consequences of his actions. As Ye Qing walked away, his voice carried a somber resolve as he addressed Wu Ming. He stated that his only concern was ensuring his sister's safety as quickly as possible, and that nothing else in the world mattered to him. His words were heavy with determination, leaving no doubt about where his priorities lay. Wu Ming watched him leave, his expression unreadable, before turning his full attention toward Song. Wu Ming's movements were deliberate as he reached down and grabbed Song by the face, his grip firm and unyielding. His voice, calm yet menacing, cut through the tense air as he reminded Song of a mercenary's duty. Fulfillment of a commission was paramount, and he declared that Song's life would end here, just as Lin's father had ordered. The weight of his words sent a chill through Song, who began to panic. Desperate to save himself, Song hurriedly offered to pay Wu Ming double the amount that Lin's father had promised. But Wu Ming's response was as cold as the steel of a blade. He asked Song how he intended to pay double when a person only had one life to give. The question hung in the air like a death sentence, leaving Song utterly bewildered. Struggling to comprehend Wu Ming's words, Song stammered in confusion, unable to find a way to bargain for his survival. Wu Ming, however, was done entertaining Song's desperation. His attention shifted momentarily as he called out to Ye Qing. He told Ye Qing that the next time their paths crossed, it would be as enemies in an all-out battle. His tone carried a strange mix of respect and anticipation, as though he welcomed the inevitability of their future clash. Ye Qing did not respond immediately. Instead, he continued toward the gate, his steps steady but purposeful. As he crossed through the shimmering portal, a sight on the other side stopped him in his tracks. Xiao Zhou was there, hiding timidly in the corner, her form trembling as though uncertain of what to expect. The moment her eyes met Ye Qing's, relief washed over her, and she called out to him with a mix of joy and tears. Ye Qing's heart clenched as he took in the sight of his sister, her fragile appearance and tear-streaked face a stark reminder of everything she had endured. He approached her slowly, his expression softening as guilt and regret filled his eyes. When he finally reached her, his voice broke slightly as he apologized for being late in rescuing her. Each word was laden with the weight of his failure to protect her sooner, but there was also a quiet promise in his tone, a vow to never let her suffer again. Xiao Zhou, overwhelmed with emotion, reached out to him, her trembling hands finding solace in his presence. That's all for today. Thanks for watching.